This is Naked Mormonism.
I pledge my life, all that I may have. I will strive to the utmost of my ability to be what you would want me to be.
It's time to find the truth.
And having set our hand to the plow, we will never look back until this work is finished.
Where is the church going?
I have faith that the Constitution will be saved as prophesied by Joseph Smith. But it will not be saved in Washington. It will be saved by enlightened members of this church.
The explicit tag is there for a reason, so if you get offended at what's said, it's not for you. But most importantly,
may you ponder the truths you've heard. May they help you become even better than you were.
skepticize everything.
Welcome to episode 30 of the Naked Mormonism podcast, the serial Mormon history podcast. Today is Thursday, March 17th. My name is Bryce Blankenagel, and thank you for joining me. The last historical episode was quite the treat. We had no illusions on to talk about the entire timeline of Dr. Philastus Hurlbut. If you don't know who No Illusions is, he's a primary contributing writer, editor, and producer of 3 amazing podcasts. He works on The Scathing Atheist, which is actually the first atheist podcast I ever listened to, and it's fantastic. Can't recommend it highly enough. They also have The Skeptocrat, which is their political show, hailing from the far center, self-acclaimed. And of course, they have God Awful Movies, which is their Christian movie review podcast. Just a quick side note. When Noah and Lucinda were here, they told me about the movie that they would be reviewing next, and it's called If Footmen Tire You, What Will Horses Do? They had just reviewed the movie Risen, which was like this high production, high dollar, like Jesus movie flick. So they decided to go to the completely opposite side of every spectrum possible that makes a movie good or bad. And this is the absolute epic of what a bad movie is. Noah, when he was here, said that if there's any movie to watch before listening to that episode of the God Awful Movies podcast that deconstructs a movie, it was this movie, If Footmen Tire You, What Will Horses Do? I'll admit, I tortured myself with the hour-long movie. And the following day, I listened to that Gamcast review of the movie, and it was really... It was the hardest I've laughed in weeks. I mean, at one point they were talking about something that happened to a kid in the movie, like a little 9 or 10-year-old kid, and I had to pause the podcast because I couldn't hear it from my laughter. I was just boisterously, painfully laughing, clutching my sides, wiping tears off my face. It was just amazing. So, I mean, just if you haven't checked out God Awful Movies, Skeptocrat, and Scathing Atheist, please check them out. They're fantastic, fantastic podcasts. Beyond that, I also wanted to thank Tanner Gilliland for engaging in such an enlightening interview on the podcast. It's really easy to find him on the internet. You search for Zelph on the Shelf, or you can find him with his YouTube video of his poem called Mormonism and Me, just by a quick search on YouTube. And I have to admit that poem was just so amazing. I really, really enjoyed having a good discussion with Tanner there. Anyway, on to the roundup here. On the last historical episode, Noah and I discussed all the ins and outs of Mr. Dr. Philastus Hurlbut. I say that Mr. in front because he wasn't actually a doctor. His name was Doctor. We discussed when he came into the timeline, when he went on his mission, all the way through his campaign to bring the Spalding theory to light. And then it all ended with him being jailed for allegedly assaulting Joseph. And then Hurlbut subsequently sold his work to E.D. Howe to publish in Mormonism Unveiled. So with all that, it's clear to see that Dr. Phil here, Mr. Hurlbut, experience the worst possible outcome in the given scenario. Now, there have been a lot of theories tossed around concerning this time in the Mormon timeline, you know, from early 1833 to early 1834. I mean, for those that agree with the Spalding theory, they could easily claim that Hurlbut attained a copy of the manuscript found and then possibly like sold it to Joe and Rigdon or something, who, you know, would promptly destroy it if it posed an existential threat to the church. And then, you know, maybe they stiffed Dr. Phil Hurlbut out of the money, which serves to explain why he wanted to kill Joseph or Mormonism in general, which kind of got him thrown in jail in the first place. And, that's only one possible scenario that explains all the evidence. There's a lot of other theories out there that really show what happened to, or, help to explain what happened to Dr. Philastus Hurlbut. So the recurring theme throughout most of his timeline is the fact that Joe always won. No matter how hard Dr. Phil tried, no matter what evidence he could amass against the church, Joe and Rigdon still retained the vast majority of the followers, and Hurlbut ended up in 1834 completely financially destitute and living with one of his old flames in Kirtland. Now, I want to talk about Dr. Phil for just a moment here because he's really important to Mormon history and to Book of Mormon authorship studies. We need to, kind of paint a picture of who Dr. Phil really was, just so we can properly understand the nature of the evidence that he collected and some of the objections to that evidence. So Hurlbut kind of embodies a distinct image in my mind. I don't know if it's accurate, but I'm basing it off of a lot of separate descriptions. I picture him as being kind of like a grubby, dirty man in his mid-30s. From some of these descriptions that I've read, he seems like he wasn't very well kept. Probably always had like a scruffy beard going on and wore the same clothes for weeks on end, much like a lot of people did back then. And he was a very woman-centric guy, having been kicked out of 4 churches for unchristian-like conduct before he was kicked out of Joe's church for the same reason. From what I can tell, a few of the people that he stayed with during his travels for the Spalding theory were actually women that he'd been with before. Probably a few of the women that he hadn't, treated like complete dog shit before then. He was traveling out to, New York and Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, all over Ohio. And he had to stay with some people during these times, and who better than people that he'd, shared a bed with before. Altogether, Hurlbut was, destitute, like most non-landowners were in the frontier days. And it seemed like he was kind of like bumming around and getting his living expenses paid by nearly any means necessary. This is important to keep in mind. He really wasn't a pleasant man to be around, and we can get a feeling for that when we hear what Spalding's widow, Matilda Davison, said about him. She said that she didn't like him and that she didn't trust him really to comply with any of his requests stand alone. So she needed to see a letter from Solomon Spalding's brother before she could even trust Hurlbut to let him into the house, even though he was carrying around a Book of Mormon, and he probably showed it to her, describing the similarities between it and her late husband's work. So let's also consider the campaign that Dr. Phil Hurlbut was on as a whole. He was hired by a committee of people that didn't like the church. They were labeled as an anti-Mormon committee. Now, once we run into this detail, the problems begin to stack up when you consider the situation from a believer's perspective. Already, we know that this guy Hurlbut isn't the most trustworthy guy, and we have this picture of him as being kind of a bum. And, he was a womanizer, which has a fair amount of stigma in and of itself. Upon embarking on this anti-Mormon campaign, he talked to a bunch of people that hated Joe or hated the Smiths or didn't like the Mormons in general. And, he also lectured at other churches about the harms of Mormonism. Now, I almost wonder if he didn't, if this didn't play into some of the anti-other religion rhetoric that made its way into Mormonism at the beginning, because these other churches were preaching against Mormonism, and when Hurlbut was on his tour, he was appearing and lecturing at these other churches, Methodists or Baptists or whatever, and trying to perpetuate or, bring to light the Spalding theory to these people. And obviously Mormons were afraid of him or didn't like him or hated him or whatever. So, after it was all over, he threatened Joe's life, and then Joe filed a recognizance against him, which was like a restraining order. And, Joe hated him as well. So you can only imagine the anti-Hurlbut rhetoric that was coming from Joe and the leadership of the church. Then you compound on top of that the fact that he was hired to come up with this evidence that proves Mormonism completely false, and you have an historical figure that is ripe for ad hominem attacks from the Mormon perspective. I mean, it's very easy for a believer to completely discount this information that was gathered by Dr. Hurlbut. I mean, if Mormons today can write off the work of somebody like Dan Vogel or D. Michael Quinn, it's inexplicably easier with somebody like Hurlbut that can be considered a drag of society or a vagabond. And, he did all of his research more than 180 years ago. He's just not credible in, most scholars' eyes, especially if they're believers. Mormon scholars often argue that Hurlbut was only a member of the church for a little while, and then he didn't do anything noteworthy or establish his own credibility in the church. Therefore, nothing that Hurlbut collected should be considered in the realm of historical reality, which is completely fallacious. It's a horrible way to attack a person's argument. It's just ad hominem attacks. Mormons may argue that Hurlbut manufactured a consensus between all of the quotes that he provided, or, he possibly just invented them out of whole cloth, which is absurd. Of course, these arguments, all of them against Hurlbut's work, really don't hold up for shit. I mean, yes, he was a grubby man and he did things that made him seem less than trustworthy. Yes, he was a member of the church for just a few months and then he was excommunicated for his actions. We don't know the details behind that. Yes, Hurlbut may have altered the exact wording of what these people said and asked them to sign it. Yes, Hurlbut did threaten the church and arguably had an axe to grind against it and ended up being held responsible for keeping the peace and for paying the court fees and bond, which total in excess of $300, which he probably wasn't very happy with and solidified his place in financial destitution. Now, all of these arguments against, that count against Hurlbut, I mean, when you consider them outside of the context of what was happening, that's the only place that they make sense. But once you look at the arguments and strip away the ad hominem attacks and wrap all those arguments against Hurlbut and his work into the timeline of Mormon history and the context of the church at the time, all of the pieces fit together and all of the evidence makes a lot of sense, as does the Spalding theory. So, follow me along this path for a minute. If the Spalding theory is true, everything makes sense in context. I mean, we can say, given all the evidence that supports the theory, it's internally consistent at very, very least. I mean, Hurlbut was preaching Mormonism, found out it wasn't true, then went to extreme lengths to prove a natural explanation for the Book of Mormon. He didn't get excommunicated, then disappear for 6 months, and then just ended up producing the evidence from whole cloth. Instead, we're able to track him as he was collecting all of this evidence, traveling from town to town, lecturing all along the way, and releasing newspaper articles and everything. We were able to see him actively acting in these areas where in Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, the places that I stated before. So beyond that, the vast majority of the quotes that he collected during this time period were multiply attested by subsequent interviews by people other than Hurlbut. And nothing that was said by any of those people in the quotes that Hurlbut collected was ever retracted or contradicted by the people that gave the quotes. Some were later clarified, but never retracted. The evidence stands. As for the claim that he had a financial stake in getting this information and performing this research, I would just kind of default back to what Noah said when we were talking about Hurlbut. Noah said something along the lines of, when you hire a private investigator, he has a financial stake in getting information, but you don't discount what he tells you just because the money is on the line. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but the same thing happened with this anti-Mormon committee hiring Hurlbut to collect this evidence. I mean, yes, he did have a financial stake in collecting this evidence, but it's not like Hurlbut was paid off an exorbitant amount of money just to claim that the Book of Mormon was false. Dr. Hurlbut was merely given travel and living expenses during this time so he could focus on gathering the evidence as opposed to dealing with financial destitution while conducting this research. The money he received wasn't part of a conspiracy that bought Hurlbut's statement or something. It was more like a research grant. And much like today's research grants, the person performing the research usually doesn't benefit financially much from conducting research. Rather, the entity funding the research usually is the beneficiary. We say the same thing happening when we look at Hurlbut and his work. So after all this research was conducted, he didn't live the life of luxury from his huge payoff. Rather, he was left more poor than when he had first started the research, with a restraining order on his record. Just consider all the extra shit that Hurlbut had to deal with in doing this research. He was persecuted by Joe and the other Mormons. He was left with no money and a restraining order against him, living in a town full of people that hated him. He'd been thrown in jail and socially maligned for his work, and by the end of it all, he disappeared into the annals of American history, barely meriting a single line mention in Mormonism Unveiled, which contained all of his research. Considering Hurlbut's timeline and the fact that he basically gave his life to the church that he later found out was completely false, it's understandable that he may have been angry or may have had an axe to grind against Joe, Rigdon, and the church. The thing is, it's natural for him to have been angry at the situation. And attacking him as a person are nothing but ad hominem attacks, and it doesn't do anything to reduce the credibility of the work that he collected. It was all research regardless. I mean, the exact timeline that Hurlbut followed here is basically what we'd expect out of anybody that was, in his given circumstances. And, really, I pity his luck and respectfully commend him for his efforts. And I have to thank him for having to deal with the height of Joe assholery up to this point. And, I'm glad that he had to deal with it back then so we can read about the struggles that he went through today and really understand his frustrations throughout the Mormon chapter in his personal timeline. That's a sufficient roundup for the last historical episode, and it catapults us into the meat of today's episode. We have a lot of ground to cover here, as does Zion's camp, so let's get started. For the historical portion of this episode, I brought on a good friend to help understand exactly what happened. You may know him from the My Book of Mormon podcast, or just from the 45-minute drinking game that he crushed me in during the 7.5-hour Book of Mormon episode of this show. He's a fellow history nerd with a voice as smooth as a duck's butt feathers, and he also has 2 first names. Welcome to the show, David Michael.
Well, thank you, Bryce Blankenagel. What did you say? Smooth as a duck's butt feathers? That's a first. I like it. I've never felt the urge to touch a duck's butt feathers, but hey, you must know.
It is like gripping the absolute unbelievably soft. It's like a cat's belly fur,
okay.
Only way softer.
Bryce, we're already off to a bad start.
You don't even know.
Let's get to the history.
Oh, yeah, you got to rein me in on my show and your show all the time here. So let's, I invited you onto the show here just because it's kind of fun to have somebody else to go back and forth with on historical stuff like this. And I got to be honest, talking about the topic that we have lined up today, I think you're going to be kind of interested being a fellow military history nerd.
Well, that's exciting. And I'll be honest, Bryce, it's been a dream of mine to be on this show since episode 1. So yeah, I'm totally excited to be here. Can't wait to hear what you have in store for us. And so military, huh? Is this about the Nauvoo army or you know what? Don't even tell me. No spoilers.
You are going to find out. We're all going to find out. And I only found out recently. I mean, a week ago, I didn't know anything about what we're going to talk about today, but now it's, I'm glad that I know because there's a lot that happens in this timeline that we're going to talk about. So, over the last few episodes, we've been covering a lot of ground, in terms of time relative to the other shows. I mean, I've done episodes where one full 2+ hour episode is covering just a week worth of time, right? Like the 2 trials that happened in 1830. That was a 1 week's time and that was a whole episode. Well, like last episode, an episode a month ago covered the timeline of Joe and the company up till, very late 1833. And then the last episode with Noah, we covered 1833 all the way to the beginning of 1834. So we're coming entire year-long swaths here. And, we're edging ever closer to the really crazy years in Mormon history, and I really can't wait to get to those.
I can't either. So let's get started.
Let's get started. In order to discuss our timeline today, we got to remember back to the end of episode 28. That episode finished out with talking about the battle for Zion. I don't know if you remember that, David.
Well, let's just refresh everyone's memory, Bryce, assuming I don't.
There you go. Yes, it was it was recounted through the eyes of Philo Dibble, or, we know him as Dibble Dabble. So tensions had really been rising between the residents of Jackson County and the influx of Mormons that were moving in.
Bryce, that was your gory episode.
Yeah. The episode.
All coming back now. Perhaps I tried to block it from my memory.
Where the guy had like the jaw shot off and stuff, and you know, Philo Dibble Dabble here got shot in the side with 3 different armaments, and it's like, man, whew, these guys are hardcore.
Didn't somebody get shot even like in a more sensitive place? You know what? I don't even want to remember. It was just
he got shot, and then apparently, you know, after a couple of days, he ended up like puking up a bunch of blood, and then little chunks of cloth came out from his shirt.
Why are you telling us again? It was bad enough first time.
Right? Isn't it great? So a little bit more of the graphic episode. I think that was the most graphic we've ever been on this show as far as gore and blood goes. So, you know, there have been a lot going on between the Missourians and the Mormons. You know, almost all of the Mormons that had come from anti-slavery northern states or Europe, which, you know, had mostly outlawed slavery by 1833, and Missouri was chartered as a slave state. So we can only imagine the tensions that were building up in between the Mormons and the Missourians. I mean, it wasn't just the fact that they were, you know, anti-slavery versus pro-slavery. It was also, you know, a matter of Joseph might have been like this cult leader led by Satan that people didn't like, and Mormons were like the new kids on the block. So, you know, there were like rising tensions there, and this all spurred a battle for Zion that happened on November 4th, 1833.
Now, Bryce, were the Mormons also like attempting to proselytize to all of the native Missourians? Could that have also maybe fueled it, or is that not something they were really into then?
No, that was a big part of it, actually. They were proselyting to anybody they could get a hold of. They were really establishing not in just Jackson County, but also Clay County and Caldwell County, which are the 2 counties directly north of Jackson County in Missouri. And, you know, this massive influx of new Mormons that were moving in from the east and the northern states was coupled with the fact that a lot of people in Missouri were converting to Mormonism as well, which, you know, people, when you think that Joseph is a crazy cult leader and he's led by Satan, and then, you know, your kid or your wife or your cousin converts to Mormonism, you really don't like that church very much. So that also added to the pressures a lot as well. So, I mean, it was kind of an amalgamation of a lot of things that kind of led to this thing that Mormons just called persecution, I guess you could call it.
Gotcha. Makes sense, though.
So, yeah, I mean, it does make sense. And, you know, this battle ended up, you know, it all came to a head here. I mean, Mormons were beat with bullwhips. They were shot, as we read about. They were murdered. You know, one of them was murdered, not murmured. You know, they cornered the Mormons on a farm for a few days, and, you know, they just rallied against the Mormons, you know, pitchfork and torch style. But, you know, the Mormons killed a couple of them back. So, you know, it's a little murky when you look at it from an objective perspective, right? So, in the case of this battle for Zion, what does a shepherd do when a wolf devours one of the flock? Yeah, you would hope that he takes action, one would think, anyway. I mean, it took a couple of weeks for the battle, you know, news of the battle to reach Joe, but when he did, he immediately began taking actions to remedy the situation or try and, you know, get retribution of some sort.
All right, so at this point in the story, and I remember, I've heard so many of the stories that you've told at different points in the timeline. So yeah, even like when you were on No Illusion show and you were talking about the story when Joseph Smith died, right? I mean, That was some of the stuff that you were talking about. And I was like, who is he talking about? That sounds insane. He's the king of what? It got really, really weird. So now I'm like coming back. So as of this point, you know, the church has started. It's been going for what, 3-4 years now? 4?
Yeah, 3.5 years. We're talking early 1834 when most of the timeline starts on this. So yeah, I mean 4 years.
So almost 4 years old. Which I'm excited that on the show that we're doing together on My Book of Mormon, we just kind of saw the church come to life, and so I'm hoping we get to see a little bit of the infancy there, and you know, how we got from there to where we are now. But so as of this point in this story, and I'm just trying to get everyone in the frame of mind, because I don't know, maybe a lot of your listeners are more educated about this stuff, or the people that binge listen, they're always the ones at the advantage, right? Because they just heard it.
They always know everything.
They just heard it. Oh. They don't have to think back 6 months ago. But anyway, so Joe is he's definitely in charge. He's kind of used, we'll just say, religious politics to push aside any rival he might have had, right? So Rignid's been pretty marginalized. Cowdrey's been pretty marginalized. He's definitely the man in charge.
Oh yeah, religious politics is one way to put it. At some points it's just blatant bullying, and we'll get into a quote here. Actually, it's our very next quote that we're going to talk about here that really kind of, I think, gives us a little insight into the early days of Mormonism and what Joseph's attitude was towards other people.
Well, I mean, I guess I guess the real question was just like, he's undeniably the leader at this point. There is there's no longer a struggle for who's in charge. He's the one.
Oh no, he's the one.
So to your point,
yeah, he's the one.
If the entire community felt persecuted, they would be looking to him saying, "Dude, what are you going to do?"
Right? Yeah, well, yeah,
Okay.
and that's why I said, like, when when a wolf devours one of the flock, what does the shepherd do? Because Joseph was the shepherd, right?
Yeah, what do they say? Heavy is the head that wears the crown. So there you go, Joe. You put on the crown. What you gonna do?
I don't think he was expecting all of this to go the way that it did. But, to be honest, not everything was hunky-dory in Kirtland, right? I mean, a lot of stuff was going on. There were power struggles going on. There were schisms happening. And to be honest, there was a disciplinary council that was held for our pal, not so smarty Marty, Martin Harris.
What now? Poor guy.
There have been a few of these disciplinary councils held. Hurlbutt felt the wrath of one of them, but here we go. Good old not so smarty Marty dug himself into a hole, and we're about to find out what it was about. This is taken from the history of the church, which is where most of today's episode is taken from. And quote, I then gave a relation of my situation at the time I obtained the record. So just for clarification, this is taken from the history of the church, which is written from Joseph's first person perspective.
Okay, gotcha.
We need to remember that throughout most of the quotes that I'm pulling from today. Most of it is from Joseph's perspective.
So every time we hear I, it's Joe.
I is Joe. Yes, that's
Got
correct.
it.
Unless it's quoting somebody else. But yeah, for almost all of the quotes, I is Joe. Anyway, I then gave a relation of my situation at the time I obtained the record. The persecutions I met with and prophesied that I would stand and shine like the sun in the firmament. When my enemies and the gainsayers of my testimony shall be put down and cut off and their names blotted out from among men. The council, it's just, you can taste it, right?
You didn't have to tell me that it was Joe. Of course it was. This is what he sounds like all the time.
Yeah, you can just tell. You listen to 2 minutes of this, you know exactly what it is. It goes on to say, the council proceeded to investigate certain charges presented by Elder Rigdon against Martin Harris. So we got Hingepin Rigdon bringing up charges against Not So Smarty Marty here.
Okay.
One was that he told A.C. Russell Esquire that Joseph drank too much liquor when he was translating the Book of Mormon.
Whoa.
And that he wrestled with many men and threw them. And that Harris exalted himself above Joseph in that he said, Brother Joseph knew not the contents of the Book of Mormon until it was translated, but that he himself knew all about it before it was translated.
Wait. Okay, Joe is actually saying that Martin Harris said this. Like his first-hand account is...
Sidney Rigdon was saying, he brought up the charges that Martin Harris was saying this.
I get it, but Joe felt like he had to write it down.
Yeah. Exactly. So this is this is so weird because you picture Martin as more subservient to who he considers the prophet. But according to this, it sounds like Martin Harris was trying to be, the big guy, like the big cheese in town, right?
Well, it sounded like he was trying to just discredit Joe.
Discredit or take over the throne. I mean, that's how I see most of these schisms, is like people are trying to subvert authority so that they can take some authority for themselves.
Poor Martin. He only ever wanted to make a buck. Poor guy. We can all understand that,
Just keep him in mind. He'll be coming up later.
All righty. But right now he's under. And by the way, when someone's brought up under charges, I assume that's just like a religious context, right? I mean, or do they at this point actually have some sort of civil authority in the community that they live in?
Well, it was a civil authority kind of like woven together with the ecclesiastical authority, right? So anytime that somebody was brought up on these councils for charges like Joseph drank too much liquor when he was translating the Book of Mormon, they held these disciplinary councils to try and, determine what to do with these people. I mean, Hurlbut, he felt the wrath of one of these when he brought up charges about the Spalding theory. He got excommunicated, for the same reason. It was disciplinary.
In all fairness, Bryce, it took me a lot of liquor to get through the Book of Mormon too, so I can't really fault Joe for that.
That's true. Yeah, from the very beginning, it's been alcohol inducing.
Yeah, it'd just be hypocritical of me to judge Joe for that one. So he's done a lot of bad stuff, but for that one, I got to give him a pass.
True. And I do like how it made its way in there that he wrestled with many men and threw them.
Yeah. That's just, I'm not sure if that just means he was in a fight or if I should read into that more, but boy, that sure sounds like it could go a lot of different ways, doesn't it?
Well, I'm just like, I'm not going where you went. My mind's not that far into the gutter, but I'm just saying, like, given the thing that he said before that, my testimony shall not be put down and cut off, and their name shall be blotted out from among men. And then we come upon something like this where somebody was saying that he was like throwing men and wrestling with them, and, he drank too much liquor. It's like, yeah, Joseph was kind of an asshole, right?
A little bit. Well, yeah. But
just a little bit.
I mean, how would someone like Martin Harris not know that by now? I mean, if anyone's been listening to this show from the beginning, I don't know how Martin Harris lasted this long. But anyway, yeah. All right. So Martin is under charges, brought up by Sidney Rigdon, saying, "How dare you say Joe is a drunken, ruffian?" Basically.
Exactly. Yep.
I'm with you.
Yep. Yeah, Rigdon wasn't happy about that. Or Joseph wasn't happy about it, therefore Rigdon. I don't know. I don't know how the relationship was between Joseph and Rigdon at this time. I can imagine tensions were a little strained, but I don't really know for sure. So, let's see. In February 24th, they held a meeting to decide what to do about Zion. Uh-huh. That's how long it took for word to get back about what was going on for them to decide what to do about what was going on with people being turned out of their homes and the Battle of Zion. And
how far away was it? Was it? I got the idea this was all in the same vicinity.
No, it's about 1,000 miles away. I think like 1,100 miles. So yeah, I mean, it took a while for news and information to get that far.
All right, sorry. Where is Joe during the Zion battle that we went through in 28?
Yeah, so that was all going on in Independence, Missouri. Joseph was in Kirtland, Ohio.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm sorry.
And those are
the same thing. By the way, Bryce, same thing confused me during the Book of Mormon. They jumped around geographies constantly. So anyone that knows me and has listened to my show knows that it's pretty typical. You just got to really point me in the right direction sometimes. Got it. So Joe's in Ohio, but he had now Rigdon. Okay, it's all coming back. Rigdon had gone out to missionary out in Missouri, right, and had started this community.
No, so it was not Rigdon. It was Oliver Cowdery and Ziban Peterson and Peter Whitmer and who else?
Bryce, I swear to God, I need to start over. I need to binge listen from episode 1 because
I know,
it's like,
right?
When you say it, I'm like, oh, that's right. But it's just been too long.
But no, that was where you're drawing the connection with Rigdon is because that same missionary force that went out to Missouri in the first place, they were the guys that supposedly converted Rigdon and his congregation to Mormonism. So that's where it all plays into the timeline there.
All right. This was either like a great recap for everyone that was also like needed a catch up or a big waste of time for all your listeners. Yeah. So I'm either you're welcome or I'm sorry. Yeah.
It depends on if they just binge listened to everything in the backlog or if they've been listening all along the way.
Probably.
So, they had this meeting on February 24th. They'd been receiving letters up to this point from a couple of people, Algernon Sidney Gilbert, William Wines Phelps, we call those guys Acid Gilbert and Double Dub Phelps, right? Mm-hmm. Those guys were in Independence at this time when everything was going down, and they were kicking letters over to Joseph and the congregation, and they were just getting these little piecemeal. They weren't sure exactly what was going on. So finally, in February 24th...
So at first, they were the letters were, things feel like they're heating up, we're getting dirty looks, but then eventually the letters said, shit just hit the fan. all hell broke loose.
Yeah. Well, and finally it was like, oh shit, what do we do now? So on February 24th, that's when Lyman White and Parley P. Pratt, who we know as P Cubed, actually presented their firsthand accounts of what happened. That's when they were able to make their way all the way back to Kirtland and present their case and tell everybody what had happened. This is taken from the history of the church. It says, quote, Brother Joseph then arose and said that he was going to Zion to assist in redeeming it. He called for the voice of the council to sanction his going, which was given without a dissenting voice. He then called for volunteers to go with him, when some 30 or 40 volunteered to go who were present at the council. It was a question whether they should go by land or by water, and after a short investigation, it was decided unanimously they should go by land. Joseph was nominated to be the commander-in-chief of the armies of Israel.
Boom.
Yep, and the leader of those who volunteered to go and assist in the redemption of Zion. End quote.
All right, Bryce, I do have to give Joe some credit here, right? So he heard that someone messed with his boys, and he stepped up and said, oh, hell no.
Hell to the no.
I'm going to go fuck these motherfuckers up, is what he said. That's what just happened. Now, granted, he, of course, the ego got in the way, and he was declared, what was he? What would
Commander-in-chief of the armies of Israel.
Commander-in-chief of the armies of Israel. I wonder how the actual army of Israel feels about that today. But anyway, in fairness, they didn't exist at the time. But, I mean, I got to hand it to Joe, because, I don't know, he at least had bravery, right?
Right.
Or he was just so deluded that he assumed he couldn't lose. One of the two.
You can call it that. We'll evaluate that as we as we go through this. So I will leave a link to this in the show notes, but in getting introduced and starting to familiarize myself with this whole Zion's camp thing, I watched a video that they show in seminary classes about Zion's camp, and the speech at the beginning shows this scene where there's a council of a bunch of the elders of the church, and Joseph Smith says, I will go to Zion, and everybody's like, yeah, go, you're awesome. And Joseph Smith says that I promise I will lead you there and back, and not one hair on your head will be harmed. Now
that seems like, the first rule of sales is under promise, over deliver, not the other way around.
Well, but these people had read the Book of Mormon, and considering the armies of Helaman, right, the 2,000 stripling warriors, you familiar with them, right?
Very familiar.
I would assume that if a prophet that brought this book, that brought this story to light, if a prophet in modern day said that I can go march and take a military march, and he can promise me that not a single hair on my head will be harmed. I'm going to trust that. If I believe in the Book of Mormon, I believe him as a real prophet, I'm going to trust it, right?
Hey, there's people that let themselves get bitten by poisonous snakes because of something Paul said 2,000 years ago. So yeah, that happens, Bryce. It really does happen.
I can't wait for later in this episode.
Uh-oh.
Anyway, so after he declared that I'm going to Zion, Joe and P Cubed, Parley Parker Pratt, I should say, traveled out to Western New York on a recruiting trip. And they were carrying a newspaper from Independence with them, with the headlines showing, there was a massacre, there was a battle, there was a scuffle between the Missourians and the Mormons.
Sorry, Bryce. Whom were they recruiting? Soldiers? Like a militia?
Well, that's kind of where it's not very certain, because primarily it was for soldiers, but a secondary motive was to get some money. We'll talk about that in a second, but let me read this quote real quick. This is from the history of the church. This is during the time that they were staying with a man named Alva Beeman and his family. And P Cubed recounted this quote: "Among those whose hospitality we shared in that vicinity was old Father Beeman and his amiable and interesting family. He was a good singer, and so were his 3 daughters."
What does that have to do with anything? Sorry.
Just wait. "We were much edified and comforted in their society, and were deeply interested in hearing the old gentleman and Brother Joseph converse on their early acquaintance and history." End quote. Now, that might be completely out of left field. Like, what the fuck does that have to do with anything? But just give me a second here.
Well, and also, Bryce, it does kind of just describe, like, man, life was boring then. If it was exciting that they sang well, it's like, wow, they sang well. That's, boy, you guys, you had quite the high level of entertainment back then. That's just sad.
And he said that it was deeply interesting to hear Joseph and this guy Alva talk about their early acquaintance. It's like, yeah.
By comparison, Bryce, it was either that or to listen to a bunch of kids sing all night. Yeah, I'd rather a grown-up talk about some crazy story. Knock yourself out, bro.
True that. But let me move on here, because Mary Beeman, who was one of the daughters of Alva Beeman, remembers this visit clearly, and she said, quote, "His society I prized," this is talking about Joseph Smith, "his conversation was meat and drink to me," end quote. And her sister, 19-year-old Louisa, would eventually become one of Joe's polygamous wives in Nauvoo.
Wow. So, from one visit. That is...
No. Okay, the Beeman family and the Smith family knew each other for a long time. And that's where it says, Joseph and this guy Alva were talking about their early acquaintance and their history together. So they went and visited these people, and, he had these 3 hot daughters, and Joseph was like, hey, that Louisa chick is really nice. Come 1841, she's going to be one of my wives.
Lovely. I'm afraid to ask what age she was.
At the time she was 26, I believe. So she was good. She was good.
Right.
Don't worry about that.
Man, Joe. Going for some old ladies there by your standards. Not bad.
Well, to be honest, at this time when they were staying there, she was 19, so maybe that she caught his eye, and they later on in Nauvoo, a few years later, they were sitting across the cafeteria from each other, and they locked gazes.
That was Joe's bucket list. Like every time he saw some girl he wanted to bang, he'd just write her name in there and be like, one day.
Joe's black book. I'll love to find that.
I might be 7 years before I come back. I'm gonna hit that. I'm gonna do it. I'm doing it.
It's gonna happen. Well, no, remember when we were talking about what was her name? This girl that was working with Peter Whitmer out, and Peter Whitmer was working as a tailor for Lilburn Boggs.
Yeah.
Peter Whitmer was working with this little 12-year-old girl, and when she met Joseph, she was like, "Oh, he's so amazing!" And then Joseph gave her a blessing, put his hands on her head, and was like, "Yeah, you're gonna be blessed." And that's not fucking creepy, right?
Yeah, and he married her later, right?
Yeah.
Why do you keep reminding me? Give me all the... Stop it. I'm already creeped out. Okay, yeah.
Well, I'm just saying he marked them, and then he came back for them later. And I'm just saying that what you're saying supports exactly what happened.
Yeah, I know. That's how do you write a 12-year-old in a book? That's a long game right there. Okay, so I'm with you. Let's continue with the story before we hear any more of these creepy stories that we've already heard.
Right. So they went on this recruiting trip, and then Orson Pratt, who was with them as well, decided to stay in New York and for the purpose of raising the $2,000 that was necessary to absolve the United Order from its debts.
How does one do that?
Well, supposedly that's what was, one of the objectives of this trip is he was going out, they were going out not only to recruit soldiers for Zion's camp, but also to get this money that they could pay off all of the debts.
How does one get money? Are they robbing banks? Do they get gainful employment? What are they doing?
Well, that's a good question. It just said in the history that I was reading, it just said that these people promised that they would have it, no problem. They'd be able to come up with it.
Huh.
And
we can just use our imaginations to figure out how they were planning to do that. All right.
Well, yeah, and these were old friends of Joseph, and they were old. They were probably a lot of them were probably money digger friends and people that had converted to the church that decided to stay out there when the church moved out to Ohio. So
I gotcha. So they're basically just going to be like, "Come on now, do us a solid." They didn't necessarily need to go collect money. They just needed people to forgive them that they owed money to.
Well, no, because they didn't owe any money to these people. They needed the $2,000 to apply to other debts that had happened.
Okay, got it. So they weren't forgiving; they were begging. Got it.
They were begging. Yes, correct.
All right, got it.
So after they go on this little trip, Orson Pratt stays behind. March 25th, it took a month for this trip. Joseph comes back to Kirtland, and he had spread his mighty seed of anger against the Missourians to the various Mormons out in New York. And then, really soon after getting back to Kirtland, Joe gets a letter from Orson Pratt that says they wouldn't be able to come up with the money necessary.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So it was like Orson Pratt was like, I got this, bro. And then as soon as Joe left, he sent a letter like the next day or a couple days later and was like, yeah, sorry, fucked up. We can't do it. It's amazing.
Yeah. It would have been nice to know what their actual plan was and see where it failed. But yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And what's really interesting too is like Joe wrote back a letter that was like so vitriolic against the people of New York because they had promised this money and he was like, oh, okay, all my problems are taken care of. But then, when they sent this letter and they said we can't come up with it, he's like, the blood of the people of Zion is on your head and blah, 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 blah. Like,
he didn't even have to think very hard about it because he'd already written that letter. Or actually, it was probably, what's his name? Who was the guy that actually wrote Book of Mormon?
Rigdon,
that's the one.
Yeah.
Rigdon probably wrote it.
Yeah, probably.
But it was already written because that's what happened when Moroni, Captain Moroni, right? He said that he needed some judge or somebody to like send troops, and the judge is like, yeah, so we're under attack and we can't. And Moroni was like, how dare you say no to me, right? So the letter you just described, and as you were reading it, I'm pretty sure he just plagiarized that from his own Book of Mormon because I'm pretty sure that letter's been written.
Yep. Same thing. It's amazing, isn't it? So, at this point, Joe realized that the United Order wasn't going to be absolved of its debts, and he decided to dissolve it and liquidate any of the remaining assets, meaning that anybody that held any stake in the United Order, it was dissolved basically, and they were paid out for their assets. And then the liabilities, all of the debts that United Order had were like, we're just not going to pay those. And you can suck it.
Yeah. I mean, that is kind of what happens in bankruptcy court, but usually there's a judge involved instead of someone just saying, we're out. But yeah.
Exactly.
And so who were the creditors? Were these like local businesses that they like did regular commerce with, or was this like their own parishioners?
Okay, so that plays into this whole story quite a bit because a lot of the debtors were people, they were constructing the temple at this time and they were buying raw materials for that. That was a little bit of the money was going to that. A fair amount of the money was going to other Mormons that had put up money before and said like Philo Dibble Dabble, right? He had paid a whole bunch of money to finance getting the printing press from New York. To buy it, get it from New York over to Missouri, and then get it set up there, right? That was a lot of money. So they owed a little bit of money here and there to a lot of people, but where the majority of these debts were held was to Missouri. Huh. People in Missouri, Mormons were moving over there, and then the United Order was buying up this property, buying up the land for the Mormons to live on, because those Mormons were destitute. They didn't have much money going out there anyway. They couldn't afford it. So the United Order bought that property, and the Mormons would live on it. And then the United Order just started defaulting on these loans that they had. So the people in Missouri were like, you bought this land from us, but you're defaulting on your payments? This is bullshit. So not only are you crazy Mormon, Satanist cult, whatever, not only are you trying to tell all of our slaves to learn how to read, not only are you anti-slavery abolitionists, not only are you like a horrible demon cult, you also owe us a shitload of money. So that added to all of the pressures that were going on.
Yeah. Yeah, and so the Mormons were just kind of claiming squatters' rights on the land, like, well, we're here.
Yeah, pretty much at the time. And that's why the Missourians were going through so many legal actions to try and evict them. But the Mormons were like, no. And then that built up to the pressures that caused the Missourians to burn down the printing press. And then, that.
I just love the way you said that. And the Mormons said, no. I
don't want it.
Okay. I got it.
So yeah, I mean, there was, so this is kind of what happened. This was a letter from William Wines Phelps. We know him as Double Dub Phelps, who was living in Missouri at the time. He said, "Dear brethren, there are great moves in the West. Last week, an alarm was spread in Jackson County, the seat of iniquity and bloodshed, that the Mormons were crossing the Missouri to take possession of their lands, and nearly all the county turned out prepared for war. Whoa. On Saturday and Sunday took the field near old McGee's above Blue, but no Mormons came, neither did Arthur go over to see about his spilt whiskey.
What?
So that the scene closed by burning our houses, or many of them. Our people had about 170 buildings in Jackson, and a bonfire of nearly all of them at once made a light large enough to glare on their dark deed and cup of iniquity running over at midnight."
Man, they just had a way of writing back that, didn't they?
They did. It's just great, isn't it? God.
It really was quite beautiful. All right, but let me make sure I understand. Actually, you describe. Give us the layman term of what just happened there, because I don't want to sound like an idiot if I heard it wrong.
So William Wines Phelps was living there. This was after the printing press had been burned down, after the November 4th War had happened, after that battle happened.
Yeah.
The Missourians had chased all of the Mormons out of Jackson County and burned all of their houses down and looted all of their property.
Got it. So it was the part in the beginning where they said that there was like an army waiting for the Mormons to come, but they never came. Were they like expecting some sort of counterattack?
Well, okay, so that's actually leading up. That's leading up to what's going on right here, because Joseph had sent word that he's building up the Zion's camp, and that's when he went out on his mission trip up to New York to recruit people, and word got out to Missouri that he was recruiting people. He was building up a Mormon army to cross, across the plains to go to Missouri and, reinstate the Mormons back in their rightful homes. But it's like, okay, so the Missourians did take all the Mormons' property. They burnt down their houses, but the Mormons were living on property that was the Missourians already.
Right.
And the property that the Mormons had, they had probably, acquired there through loans and through false means anyway.
Right.
So
essentially, in today's terms, that it had been foreclosed on, right? And they refused to leave.
And in that case, yeah, the mob had foreclosed and then burned their own assets down to the ground.
Wow. Just to get rid of them.
Yeah, just to get rid of them. So, yeah, it's pretty crazy there. So once this all happened, Sidney Rigdon actually advised that the church would rebrand itself to be called the Church of the Latter-day Saints instead of the Church of Christ.
Wait, this is when it happened?
Yeah, this is when it happened. This is when this first happened.
Ooh.
The Church of Latter-day Saints. It's not the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's just...
And who made that call?
Sidney Rigdon.
Wow. That's
crazy,
exciting. Right?
So
there's this. Here's the birth of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Exactly. And then that became what it was in 1847 when Brigham moved out. That we'll talk about that later. But yeah, I mean, this is when that happened. I mean, kind of crazy stuff. So... 2 days after they rebranded on May 5th, Joe and other Kirtland volunteers left for New Portage. They left Kirtland for New Portage, which was about 55 miles south of Kirtland, and that was the staging camp.
Now at this point, did they have like some militiamen or mercenaries from New York? Like, who's with them?
Yeah, so they had a bunch of not mercenaries, but a bunch of Mormons from New York. Well, a few, but primarily there was a bunch of people from Kirtland, believing members from Kirtland and the surrounding areas, from Hiram and Mentor.
Wow, so that recruiting trip to New York just pretty much failed in every direction.
Yeah, well, and beyond that, of the $2,000 that Joe needed to absolve the United Order, out of all of that, he received a total of $251.60.
Well, it ain't nothing, but it ain't going to cover the bills, though.
It was just an order of magnitude less than what he had hoped for.
Yeah,
no big deal, right?
Yeah, bummer.
So then it goes on. Let's see. Quote, "My company from Kirtland consisted of about 100 men, mostly young men and nearly all elders, priests, teachers, or deacons. As our wagons were nearly filled with baggage, we had mostly to travel on foot," end quote.
But, I mean, were these guys going there for a fight?
They were going there ready to fight. They were all armed. They had all their guns. They had a bunch of staples that they packed together in these wagons, blankets, food, stuff like that, to not only go and fight, but to also get the Mormons back into their homes that they had been chased out of and get them some necessary like living staples so they could still live there.
I just feel like this would have been a good time for some field promotions, right? So quit calling them teachers and deacons and elders. It's time for colonels and majors and captains. Like, I think that might have motivated his troops a little more than like, Deacon, take your troops to battle. It just doesn't have the same ring to it, does it? No.
Well, we get to meet Captain Brigham Young here as well. So don't worry, that happens. He takes a total military tack with this.
All right. Just checking.
It's fantastic. So, yeah, there's one thing to note about this whole time here. So what happened was, the only people that were left in Kirtland were Rigdon and Ollie, basically. The people that were prominent members that were in leadership positions. Those were the two guys that were left to run everything.
So kind of president left town, and so now the chief of staff is in charge kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So before Joe left, he actually ordained Ollie and ordained Rigdon and said that, Rigdon has all of the blessings and the full keys of the kingdom. And Ollie, you are tasked with assisting Rigdon in anything that he needs. So Ollie got the fucking shaft again. Imagine that.
Of course he was. Poor guy.
So, but one thing to point out is this time away from Rigdon and Ollie kind of left a vacuum with Joseph Smith, right? Because he always had his second in command, either Rigdon or Ollie, with him at all times. But then he goes out alone and he's like, okay, who's going to be my second in command? In steps Captain Bloody fucking Brigham Young. And this is when it happens.
Okay. So okay, you did an entire episode about Brigham Young, and it was awesome and fascinating. But the one thing I was disappointed about was, where the hell did this guy come from? This is happening right now?
This is happening right the fuck now.
I am edge of my seat, Bryce. Edge of my seat. All right, so Joe has left town. I mean, this is sounding so like, I don't know how much you know about like the fall of the Roman Republic, but this is like the triumvirate. Or triumvirate, is that what it was pronounced? But between, who was it, Caesar and Pompey and Crassus? Was that the third one? Doesn't matter. But yeah, Caesar kind of held them together. And so if he went away, the whole thing fell apart and, the whole, then Rome entered an empire. But sorry, for those of you that don't know the connection, and Bryce, if that sounded stupid, cut it out. But it does sound very similar to that, where you just have these like three, I don't know, it's like a conspiracy between three people, right? But they're all required to keep it going. And so one of them left to kind of, I don't know, seek bigger fame, fortune, or whatever Joe was going to try and do, or maybe save face, right? I mean, maybe just like not look like an idiot. And yeah, so now we have this power vacuum, right? So suddenly there's
yes,
he's gone. What do we do?
Exactly. And that's why I introduced you as a fellow history nerd, because I love stuff like this. And there's so many parallels where we can see these power vacuums happening throughout other movements, throughout other governments, throughout other, times in history. And this is the same thing that happened here. And after this whole thing went down, Captain Brigham would actually be considered one of like the co-leaders of Zion's camp. Even though in the actual dictated history of the church, he merits very little ink during this time. There isn't a whole lot about him, but he really set himself apart from a lot of the other people that were following him. And he just kind of made himself available to Joseph Smith so he could kind of slip his way into the power vacuum there. That's how I see it.
I'm with you. All right. So are we going to get any more backstory on Brigham? Like who was he before this point in time?
That's the problem with Brigham Young. He was just a dude. He was just a fucking guy. Before this, he was just like his brother brought home a Book of Mormon, Phineas Young. He picked that Book of Mormon up from Samuel Smith, Joseph's older brother. And that's it. He just read the Book of Mormon and then joined the church in 1832. He had joined a couple of other churches before then, but there is like nothing known about him before that.
And so somehow... and we don't have any kind of explanation as to why he sprung up in the leadership in Kirtland enough to suddenly be in a position to even, take a stab at filling the power vacuum.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was no different from a lot of other people that were brought into leadership positions, because there were people that were like, prominent members in Rigdon's church. And then once the Rigdon's church converted to Mormonism, they assumed like leadership positions, like Parley P. Pratt and Orson Pratt are good examples of that. They were good friends of Sidney Rigdon.
So two big companies merge, a lot of the executives stick around. Gotcha.
There you go. Exactly. Same type of thing. So one more person to focus on in the timeline here is the dissenting voice. We got the devil's advocate throughout the entire Zion's Camp march, and that's a man named Sylvester Smith. No relation to Joseph Smith.
Too many Smiths.
Yeah, I know. Sylvester, though. That's a great name. That's a great name, isn't it?
It's just like you sound like the sly one already, buddy. That's just not a good name.
Now, okay, whether he was like the only dissenting voice or he was just like the most vocal out of all of the dissenting voices, he became the poster boy for murmuring against the prophet, right?
Okay, but where he was with this group traveling to Missouri?
Yeah, so by the end of this Zion's Camp, there's over 200 people involved. So he was one of the men that was, just one of the guys, basically.
But he was already at the camp, or he was traveling with Joe and his like army, quote unquote, to get there.
He traveled from Kirtland. He was living in Kirtland and traveled with Joe. That's where it said like Joe was like, I have 100 men traveling with me. So they all met in New Portage, which was this town, about 60 miles, 55 miles south of Kirtland. And that was like their staging area where they gathered the first initial big group of soldiers to start marching.
Well, I haven't heard what he has to say yet, but I will have to caution him. You might want to be careful before questioning your commander-in-chief of the army of Israel.
Oh God!
Come on now.
Yeah, we'll get there.
You don't want to be accused of sedition.
He did become that poster boy, though. I mean, that's the thing. Like he let's see, one example that was given, Sylvester was bitching about how disgusting the food was that they had to eat. And Joe said that, an evil spirit has come over the camp. And the next day, every horse of every man that was murmuring in the camp was so badly foundered that they could scarcely lead them a few rods to water. That was a quote.
Whoa.
So
they went and like broke horses' legs or something?
No, so that's what happens when a horse eats, like when a horse changes diets or a horse eats a sugar heavy diet, their hooves become foundered and it's really painful for them. So once everybody stopped their bitching, the horses healed up by noon that next day, except for, of course, Sylvester Smith's horse, which died that next day. Because he was too evil or whatever.
So it would punish you. So I actually thought like if you were whining, that like guys would go out at night and break your horse's legs or something, but they were kind of doing that more slowly and even, I don't know, in a meaner way by just like feeding you garbage.
Well, I don't. Okay, so it wasn't malicious. It wasn't with malicious intent or anything like that. It was just a matter of the horses. This was at the very beginning of the camp. These horses probably hadn't tried the new diets out on these plains areas that they were embarking on. So a bunch of the horses were probably sick from it happening, and it became foundered. And then, that was, they just used like confirmation bias and saw, all the people that were murmuring, all their horses were in bad shape, but, they were okay by then. But, of course, Sylvester Smith, he was the most evil of the bunch and his horse died. That's kind of how I see it.
Or
so
they, poison the horse to make a point. I'm just not saying don't put it past them. That's all I'm saying, Bryce. You're giving them just quite an out. Maybe. Don't ignore every possibility here.
That might be a little more in the realm of historical fiction, but that's a Venn diagram, man, and there's a little bit of overlap between those two.
I'm just saying it can't be ruled out. That's all I'm saying.
No. So by this time, the Mormons that were living in Missouri, they had been relocated to Clay or Caldwell counties to the north of Jackson County. They had actually set up an armory to manufacture and repair, quote, swords, dirks, pistols, and stalking rifles, end quote. So, and there was also like a constant stream of letters that was going back and forth between Joe, the Missouri Mormons, and the government of Missouri. The Mormons weren't just like existing in a vacuum, right? They were being persecuted by the Missourians, but there was also the government of Missouri that was trying to play like a mediator between the two groups. And you can see in a lot of the letter exchanges between Daniel Duncan and Daniel Dunklin and a couple of other people where they're really split morally because they're like, we want to side with the Missourians, but then the Mormons are here on squatters' rights. And then, it's just this big fustercluck and they don't know exactly what to do.
Well, how large is the population of Mormons in Missouri at this point? Do we know?
That's a good question. I think it's over 200 or 300 people at the time. So, I mean, it's a sizable amount of people. I mean, they had 170 houses or buildings at the time. So you think maybe one family living in each. So it might have been upwards of, 400 or 500 people. I'm not really sure.
Gotcha.
So, and the people of Missouri, given the population of Jackson County at the time, that was enough people to like skew voting, to like alter, a lot of what was going on in the town, to be in their favor, I guess I should say. So you can understand the fear.
If it was a rural enough area, they could have elected their own congressman if they wanted.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness! Is that another spoiler? I'll just stop talking. I just hang up. I enjoy it more when I listen and don't know.
Well, there's plenty of curveballs in today's episode. Don't worry about it. Dude, we're only getting fucking started right now. We've been recording for over an hour. We're only getting started. So, okay, so what had happened was the Mormons were arguing that, hey, you should just split Jackson County into two separate counties, and you'll have the Mormon county and you'll have the Missourian county, and then everybody will be happy.
The two-state solution. Boy, these ideas never go away.
Right? Kind of weird. It's like you see it in like every shitty sitcom, right? Oh, that's your side of the apartment. This is my side. And they put a tape line down the middle of the floor, right? Yeah, that always fucking works.
It's literally like how they tried to fix Israel-Palestine. I mean, this is not, right? They're still trying to do this.
It's been a work in progress for like the last 60 years, still to no avail.
No. But all right, sorry. Two-state solution for the old... Which one is it? Missouri? Jackson County, Missouri? Yeah.
Jackson County.
Sounds good.
Yep. And of course, the Missourians were like, fucking no, we were here first. You guys you find your own fucking place to settle. You do your own thing. You do you, we'll do us. And the Mormons didn't like that.
We were here first. That's kind of what they're doing.
Yeah. And more or less. Yeah. So, let's see. So Zion's camp journeyed like all the way across Indiana and Illinois. Of course, at this time, rumors were running amok. And everybody, almost everybody knew that the Mormons were making a march to Jackson County to try and take back the Mormons' land from the mob that chased them out, right?
The funniest thing is how slow that stuff used to happen, right?
Right.
Like today, if there's a group of people that is like, we're going to go to war, it's like, I mean, next day it starts. People used to have so much warning and everyone knew and there was so much time to prepare. Man. It just must have been so much more dramatic and exciting for the build-up, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, for mobilizing to fucking invade Iraq, right? That didn't take like a week. And we fucking melted that whole goddamn state down. And that was on the other side of the globe. Yeah. Right? This is happening over 1,000-mile, swath of land that the Mormons were marching this huge contingency of, 200 people, all armed, all with wagons full of supplies and armaments and shit, all walking across. And people kept coming up to them on horses and stuff and like, who the fuck are you? And we'll actually get back to that in a little while here. But,
all right.
The legal waters were a little muddy at this time. We've kind of established that, right? The Mormons were kind of squatting. The Missourians had all these notes that the Mormons owed to them, that the Mormon Church, the United Order, owed to them, but the United Order had been dissolved. There was this march going on, and there were mobs that were gathering in protest of the Mormons. There was, nobody really knew what was going to happen. And of course, the officials of the state didn't know what side to take in the issue.
What was the fallout from the big shootout? Like, legally speaking?
Legally speaking, not really much. That's kind of after that. That's when the Mormons got chased out and moved to Caldwell. And that's when the Mormons were trying to, that's what we're reading about right now. That's what we're discussing is this fallout that was happening at the time.
So no one in Missouri was necessarily prosecuted for attacking necessarily.
No, no,
Gotcha.
not at all. And the Mormons felt wronged in that case, but the Missourians were like, well, they were fucking squatting here, and they're this crazy religious cult, so we don't want them here. And, you know, and when you have all of the citizens of a city saying we don't want somebody here, it's kind of hard to bring legal action against those people when they rise up against them, right?
Oh,
so,
true.
yeah, I mean, altogether, it was really muddy, right? It was all really confusing.
All right.
So,
Yeah.
you know, we got Joe and his crew of, you know, it was about 130 guys at this time. More people joined up as they were making their march. But, you know, right after he left New Portage and he was making his trek across Indiana and Illinois, there was about 130 guys.
All right.
And there were multiple times that people would ride up, like on horses, ride up to the camp and ask who they were or like who their leader was. And, with this, what we're about to read is an exchange that was recorded by Joseph in the history of the church. But this exchange was really, really similar to a lot of other exchanges that I found in other guys' journals about it. So,
all right. So, but for the record, this, 130 or so guys, these were just guys. This was not like men with their families.
Just guys.
Got it. All right.
Just
so this
guys.
This looks like an army. I mean, outside of it,
Yeah.
probably weren't in uniform or anything, but they were armed
No,
and they were just men and traveling together for a specific purpose.
yeah, they were like these Rough Rider, like ragtag kind of hillbilly guys with a bunch of wagons with supplies, and all of them were carrying their guns. So that could raise suspicion.
Yeah, maybe.
Right, yeah, it would be a little intimidating, right? Especially if they're headed straight for Missouri.
It's like the 1830s version of a motorcycle gang, basically.
Riding around on their horses and whatnot.
Right.
So this is the exchange from Joseph's perspective. Quote, while we were eating dinner, 3 gentlemen came riding up on very fine-looking horses and commenced their inquiries of various ones concerning our traveling in so large a body, asking where we were from and where we were going. The reply was as usual. Some said, the state of Maine. Another would say, I am from York State. Some from Massachusetts, some from Ohio, and some replied, we are going from the east, and as soon as we have done eating dinner, we shall be going to the west again. They then addressed themselves to Dr. Frederick G. Williams, we know him as Freddie G. Willie, to see if they could find out who the leader of the camp was. The doctor replied, we have no one in particular. They asked if we had not a general to take the lead of the company. The reply was, no one in particular. But, said they, is there not someone among you whom you call your captain or leader who is superior to the rest? He answered, sometimes one and sometimes another takes charge of the company so as not to throw the burden upon anyone in particular.
What?
These spies who had come from the west passed us several times the same day and the next. End quote.
That is a very surprising story. So why would Joe not kind of stand out front and say, it is I, the great commander-in-chief of the army of Israel? Like, it seems like this was a great moment because these were people from all over, right? You had Maine, Massachusetts, West, East. I mean, this was presumably reporters in some cases. So why would he not want to brag?
I think that that might play into kind of what happens later, because I don't think he wanted to show his hand yet. I think that was always going to, he had this ace up his sleeve, right? Oh, I'm going to spring it on. I'm actually, we're actually a group of Mormon militia ready to fight for our rights, right? He had this ace and he didn't want anybody, taking that from him or discovering it before, he didn't want to shoot his wad before the end, right?
Gotcha. Or maybe he was just so tired of getting arrested and tried that he was just like, just no one say my name. Could have been that.
Well, and you also think the United Order, like people were out, the debtors were out trying to collect on the Mormons too, and on Joseph Smith especially. So, people were looking for Joseph.
Oh, so they didn't even admit they were Mormons, this group?
Well, that's the thing, is everybody knew that they were Mormons, but they'd come up to him and everybody in the camp would say, who's leading this camp? The God of Israel, or who, or like the exchange we just read where they say, oh, we don't have anybody in particular that's leading us. So the people can be like, oh, so that's Joseph Smith, because nobody knew who Joseph Smith was. Nobody knew his face. And, there weren't newspaper pictures of his face. Nobody knew what he looked like. So he was just like, I'll just keep my fucking mouth shut. And they won't they won't come against us, or they won't know where to find us yet.
But just, all right, and this is, and again, I'm not an expert on early American history, but I would imagine that a group of men this large, without, like, that were not traveling with their families, right, going over this vast a distance armed, I mean, that just, what else would that be, right?
Right.
Outside of some sort of private militia. Because there was certainly, every time you hear about like a large party traveling, it was usually because people were relocating, right? It wasn't just a bunch of dudes with guns.
Unless it was an army, right?
Yeah.
But no, I think you're right. And they were also on the road from Ohio to Missouri. That was, I mean, a very main highway of travel. That was a common area where a lot of people were passing them on the road. And it's like, what the hell is this huge army doing? What are their plans? What's going on here?
But were there like people in Missouri and Maine, like you mentioned, that were actually like opening newspapers to say, ooh, what happened? Have they made it? Like, was this kind of like a tabloid story at the time?
Oh yeah, no, everybody knew about it. That's what the thing is. There were not only were there letter exchanges going on between the Missourians and the Missouri leadership, the governor and whatnot, and the Mormons. There was these newspaper articles that were also cropping up everywhere, talking about this huge camp of possible Mormons that are going, and people would go and try and verify this story. Are these people actually Mormons? And then they would never cop to it. They would never say, oh yes, we are Mormons. This is Joseph Smith. This is our, march that we're leading to Missouri, because I think they were afraid that as soon as that happened, as soon as they identified as like a religious militia, they, everybody would rise up against them and just slaughter them in a field somewhere.
Wow.
That's my
thoughts.
Right.
I'm excited. Okay. So everyone knows that something's up, and everyone seems like they know what's up, but no one can like necessarily prove it. So everyone's just kind of, well, let's just see how this plays out. That's kind of like the feel I get from the general populace of Americans paying attention to the story. That's just, you know what? Well, from what I know about Americans, they probably wanted to see how it played out, right? It's like, don't get in their way. Actually, just get out of their way. We kind of want to see how this goes. The reality show isn't over yet. We're not at the end of the season of this reality show. Let's see what happens.
Well, right. And there was no TV. There wasn't radio. This was entertainment. That's why people were talking about it. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, remember the letter before? A guy was so excited because kids sang well. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
That was a hell of a fun night for you. So yeah, I can imagine. This is like probably the highlight of everyone. It's like, this is an army crossing a country to go fight at some religious. Let's watch. Everybody tuned in every Monday for the newspaper.
And today, people pay attention to the Kardashians. Back then, it was the Mormonites. I mean, it's the same thing. It's like the new biggest story that was going on, dude. It's great.
Love it. All right, so I'm right there with them. I admit I'm also intrigued, so I can't blame these people. It'd be the pot calling the kettle black. So let's see what happens.
So we got to take a little side note from what the actual military part of it and talk about something else that was going on. So they're crossing the prairie, and there are rattlers everywhere, rattlesnakes. And Joseph, there was an instance where it first occurs in the history of the church, and Joseph said, these guys found 2 rattlesnakes, and Joseph came up to him and said, "No, don't kill them, or how will the snake ever lose its venom if we're always trying to kill it?" Basically,
no.
So he kind of set out a decree and was like, we don't kill any wildlife on this trek unless it's absolutely necessary for sustenance. Of course, there was an instance later on after he made that decree where some guys were looking at a squirrel, and he grabbed one of the guy's pistols and shot the squirrel. Joseph grabbed the pistol and shot it, and was like, and then one of the guys walked up and said, "Oh, this is what we're going to eat for dinner tonight." It's like, Jesus.
Because it was shot.
Yeah, it was insane.
Bryce, I was so afraid that Joe was going to start like trying to prove that venom couldn't hurt him, and I was really worried that's where the story was going. So, all right, dodged a bullet on that one.
Not Keep so going. Smarty Marty. Martin Harris began boasting to everybody that he could handle poisonous snakes.
Oh my God, Bryce, really? You made me believe we dodged the bullet. You really did. You're an asshole. So relieved.
Now,
Okay.
put yourself in
Okay.
Martin Harris's position. I think we've gotten to that point in our reading of the Doctrine and Covenants on your show. But Joseph Smith promised Martin Harris and some others that anybody that joins the church, they can handle snakes and not be hurt. They can drink poison and not be hurt. You know, it was like the biblical teaching. So you wonder where Martin Harris might have gotten this notion that he could possibly handle a poisonous snake and not get bit.
Not only that, people that ever question your nicknaming of people, just wait, just give it time. So yeah, if you ever weren't sure if Not So Smarty Marty was a good name for Martin Harris, I have a feeling we're about to find out how he earns this nickname.
Well,
So Bryce, even though I feel so bad for this guy. It's just everything goes wrong for him.
oh my God.
But let's hear what happens to poor old Marty. Oh, go on. I mean, just rip the Band-Aid off, Bryce. Give it to me.
Martin Harris played with a black prairie snake with his bare feet and got bit on the left big toe.
Lovely. Sounds, yeah. So, okay. Did God, keep the venom from? Just tell me what happened. I can't even do it. I just feel so bad. All right, so Martin Harris, Not So Smarty Marty, has just voluntarily taken a rattlesnake and had it bite his big toe. That's what just happened, right? I mean, I heard that right.
That is what happened.
Okay. Just ain't sure. All right, what's next, Bryce? Let's see what happens.
Martin Harris played with a snake with his foot.
It's Joe, you just stop picking on the dumb kid, Joe. Really. Knock it off. You already took all his money. You already took everything he has. Now you're going to make him, I just feel so bad for him.
He's over in the corners. He's just picking his nose, staring at his belly button. Leave him be.
Yeah.
Let him do his thing.
Well, Joe said a snake wouldn't hurt me. Joe, a snake won't hurt me, right? It's like, Joe should be like, Martin, sometimes let me teach you about hyperbole, No.
Oh, God. All right. It took me a minute to find it, but okay. So this is what happened when Martin Harris got bit by this snake. I'm just going to read the whole thing.
Can't wait.
Martin Harris, having boasted to the brethren that he could handle snakes with perfect safety, while fooling with a black snake with his bare foot, he received a bite on his left foot. I love it.
It's not funny. Poor man.
The fact was communicated to me, and I took occasion to reprove him and exhort the brethren never to trifle with the promises of God. I told them it was presumption for anyone to provoke a serpent to bite him. But if a man of God was accidentally bitten by a poisonous serpent, he might have faith, or his brethren might have faith for him, so that the Lord would hear his prayer and he might be healed. But when a man designedly provokes a serpent to bite him, the principle is the same as when a man drinks deadly poison knowing it to be such.
Yeah. The end was exactly right. Yeah, it is the same. It's exactly the same. When you promise me I can't be harmed, that should also apply. Exactly. Yeah. This is amazing. So Joe is saying when God makes a promise to you, he'll only keep it if it happens by accident?
Yeah.
What?
But when you're provoking the serpent to bite you, then it doesn't apply. It's like, oh, so you're being a dick about it? Then the serpent will kill you. It's
amazing. That is amazing.
It wasn't a rattlesnake. I need to put. I got to put everybody's worries to rest. Martin Harris was fine. It wasn't a rattlesnake. It was just a little black prairie snake. It was just fine. He got bit on the toe, and that was it. He might have had a little bit of a limp for a day, but that was it.
Good God, Martin! How stupid are you? You can't even pick the right snake to try and. He's just such an idiot. Yeah, honestly, I'm so glad. I'm actually, this is the worst thing I'm ever going to say in my life, but I'm actually glad that Martin Harris was like a wife beater because I can not feel that bad for him, right? I can actually just like, well, you know what? You were an asshole, so screw you, you idiot, right? Yeah,
assholes get hind tit. They get the short end of the stick.
Sorry,
That's
dude. You just sorry. I can't pity you that much, but man, what a moron. So anyway, but still, the logic. Joe was quick on his feet. I'll give him that, because it's like, oh shit, here I promised him he wouldn't get hurt, and I forgot how dumb he is. Now he's grabbing rattlesnakes, and he's, oh, what do I do now? And he's like, I got it. So you can't provoke. Yeah, okay, I got it. Everybody gather around. And then after he gives this great speech, they're like, yeah, it wasn't a rattlesnake after all. And he's like, oh, well, yeah, all that still applies. Like, how much cooler would it have been if Joe would have been like, watch, the Lord will heal him. You know, it's just sitting there sweating bullets. And all of a sudden it's like, it wasn't a rattlesnake. And it's like, it was a rattlesnake, but the Lord turned it into a black-headed nothing or whatever the hell it was. Like, he could have pulled that off too, but he chickened out. He actually didn't chicken out. He just went with the like, oh shit, he's gonna die if I don't say something, because he thought he was bitten by a rattlesnake. So yeah,
it's so amazing. Yeah, and then
quick on his feet though. Quick on his feet.
Yeah, by the end of it, he turns it into like this object lesson. And dude, throughout this whole fucking history, everything that I read throughout this, I filtered out so many of these where Joseph just got on a high horse when something happened in the camp, some malady, somebody got bit, something like this happened, and Joseph got up on a wagon wheel or whatever and was like, and then the Lord said, blah, 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 if you tempt the Lord and provoke a snake to bite you, you're fucked. And he did it all the time.
Bryce, is it? I hate to pause if you have to look one up, but is there any way we can get another one? That sounds so awesome. Anyone, I don't care, pick it random. So just like some event would happen, and then Joe would just be like instant revelation. I don't know, maybe I'm just impressed.
We're actually going to talk about a couple of them. So I'll leave you on the hook there. I don't want to go spend another 20-minute break. Look.
Oh, good. Okay, I'm excited. Because I'm sorry, you teased me a little, Bryce. You couldn't just shut up about it. So yeah. So with that teaser, I will say, pray continue, sir.
Ah, fantastic. Okay, so the next thing, when they arrived to Indianapolis, Joe actually sent out Freddie Willie, Frederick G. Williams in disguise, and for the purpose of A, buying powder for their guns, and B, to get a feeling for the opinion of the Mormons in the town, right? He wanted to go in and see what people were talking about, what was everybody talking about.
I do wonder what a non-Mormon disguise is. Like, I don't know. What does that mean?
Why would these people know what this guy looks like anyway? He's just
exactly. Why would just walking in not be, just as conspicuous as a disguise?
He put on like one of those like plastic glasses and mustache things with the big nose.
There you go.
I'm not a Mormon, I swear.
Everybody put on clown wigs. Come on. All right, fair enough. Fine, but so they're in disguise, and they're like, so what are these? What does this town think of us? What does this town think of those Mormons? I hear those Mormons coming.
Of those, what do you guys think? Mormons.
So that's what they're there to do, like assess the situation ahead of them.
Yep, and it was Joe just sent this one incognito guy, so he didn't send in a couple guys. It was just one Freddie Willie. That was it.
Okay, sorry about that. So just the one spot. Freddie, what is it?
Freddie Willie, Frederick G. Williams, Freddie G. Willie.
Freddie Willie.
Yeah.
Freddie the Spy.
Freddie the Spy, that's right. So he goes in and he comes back with 2 kegs of powder, and then he said that the people are curious, but they're not looking to start any trouble.
Oh,
so,
right.
This is Indianapolis.
So first of all, let's give Freddie credit. Well, successful mission.
Successful mission. Good job. Yep.
Good job. All right.
Yep. The reconnaissance successfully acquired. Very well done, Freddie Willie.
And the barrels of powder.
And he got some some powder, so they're going to be able to shoot their guns. That's good news.
There you go. That's just saying. Well done, Freddie the Spy.
But, Indianapolis wasn't really a place of like anti-Mormonism. People there weren't people from Missouri there that hated the Mormons. He just wanted to go talk to the people and be like, hey, do you hate the Mormons, or are they cool if they come through town? So he came back to Joseph and was like, hey, people are curious, but they don't really give a fuck.
Right.
And then
they're more just like, look, we're following the story. We want to see how it plays out.
Right.
So we're not going to get in your way, because we kind of want to see what happens next.
and these people must have known that they were on like a pass through town. They must have known that they were like on the main hub, that they were a main trading area, that the Mormons would probably be coming through, buying supplies and, leaving.
I'll bet, no, honestly, Bryce, I'll bet there was like media there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like, they were excited. I totally, this is reality television in this time period. It really is. Like,
it is.
I would have been excited if I was in Indianapolis and heard that they were coming through. I'd been like, awesome, we get to see them. Oh, so cool. The celebrities are coming through town.
The Mormons, the Mormon brigade. But Joseph averted any possible crisis by splitting everybody up and splitting them, sending them through different routes through town. So people were like camped out waiting for the Mormons to come into town.
Everybody in town got a little treat. So
a little treat,
Maybe just being nice. Everybody wants to see the hey, come on. You're at an airport and you hear the Kardashian family is there.
Oh God.
You're not, and I mean, but honestly, if it's like, hey, they're just 2 gates down, you'd kind of want to just, all right, I'll just take a peek. Like, who doesn't want to see the celebrities coming through town? Now, do we respect them? Do we have anything good to say about them? Well, that's beside the point.
I could see your ass from 2 gates away.
You take a peek. So here you have this mysterious army of Mormons traveling through your state. Everyone knows that they're going to Missouri to go, like, there's going to be a battle. It's going to be exciting, And so, yeah, everybody wants to take a peek, and they're not going to get in their way. Goodness, no. They want to, damn it, I don't want to battle. Why would I want to fight you? I don't want to die. I don't have a dog in this fight. But I would love to watch the fight.
I'd love to watch it. Yes, I want to see it. I want to be sitting in my lawn chair with a drink with a little umbrella, just watching this happen.
Of course. I know. I can't even judge him for it. I'm right there with him. I mean, I would probably have reacted the exact same way. Yeah. And so maybe Joe was just being nice, kind of just saying, look, they're all going to just get in our way because everybody wants to see us. Maybe we just all split up so everybody gets to see a few Mormons. They'll all be happy. And then we can just get on.
It's like the paparazzi conundrum, right? You got to have at least a couple so they know that you exist and you were in a place at a time. But like, if you get crowded by too many, it's just like it's a complete headache, right? You want to fuck with that. But.
Yeah. So I'm jumping to like extreme conclusions. What did you say before? Creating historical fiction. But I don't know. I think perhaps that I don't know. It makes sense if Joe was just like feeding the crowd. And also, by the way, Bryce, I thought about this after you said it before. It is quite ironic that you're accusing me of historical fiction when we're talking about Joseph Smith. That is fantastic.
The best part about it, the primary source I used for this whole episode was the history of the church, which is all written from Joseph's perspective. So everything that we're getting this episode, almost everything is all from the mouth of Joe. It's great. We're seeing it through his eyes. Are you ready for the next thing?
I don't know if I am or not, Bryce, but you're going to lay it on me anyway.
No. Okay. I can't quite get to that. No, we're not quite ready for that.
Oh, you haven't prepped me enough? I'll be too shocked.
No, I do have to throw this into the mix too, because this is something that was going on multiple times. I saw this throughout here all of the time. So, at one point here, we got May 26th. The account says, quote, "A very hot day. We traveled through Paris and across 16 Mile Prairie. At noon, we stopped to bait at a slough about 6 miles from the timber, having no water to drink, but such as was filled with living animals, commonly known as wigglers. And as we did not like to swallow them, we strained the water before using it."
What? I hope I'm not alone that most of that I did not understand. Like, we baited by the slog, and I just don't know what most of the words meant, but were they eating worms?
That was a recurring theme, is constantly they had to drink like nasty fetid water and rotten food. Like they didn't exactly go out here with the best preparations for a month worth of travel all of the time. It wasn't just this account where they were drinking water that had little wigglers in it that they had to strain out of the water, but there was times that the water was like fetid or it smelled of something, and then they were eating like rotten ham at one point, and it was like, man, it's like all of the time they were just dealing with like shit circumstances. Joseph was not good on the planning department in this case.
Because like he just didn't realize how vast the distances were between cities and settlements, basically.
I think
like,
that was the case. And also,
you had to go out into the middle of nowhere for quite some time to get from point A to point B. And you better be prepared for that with your supplies, and they clearly weren't.
Yeah, and also I would say that they didn't have a lot of money. Like he was planning on getting $2,000 to finance this whole trip and to get the United Order out of Hawk and to set everything right. And he only got $251 for this entire trip. Now you're feeding, if by the end of this you're feeding 200 mouths. A couple times a day. That's a lot of food. That's a lot of supplies. You gotta, man. I don't think he considered the logistics.
How did it jump? I thought it was 130. Are they like collecting people as they go?
Yeah, as they go. That's the thing is like as they go, they're sending out runners.
My God. So this is getting bigger?
They're sending out people to other Mormon settlements along the way and saying, hey, join our cause. We're making a march. Join up. And there's a couple of times throughout the time where like a dozen guys join or like 30 guys join. So like right now there's like 130, 140 guys. By the end of it, there's like 220 people, I think.
So at this point, they've passed Indianapolis, right?
Yeah.
But they're still in Indiana, but they're already up to 200 to 225 people or guys.
But no, when they hit the Missouri border, when they hit the Mississippi, that's pretty much when they hit critical mass. That's when they hit the 200 people.
Gotcha.
So yeah, they're still 130, 140 about this time.
Man, I'm glad Joe picked Missouri because they were traveling straight to Chicago until they made that left turn at Indy.
Just a slight left turn. Yep. Keep going that way instead of taking a right. Yep.
All right. So this, so they're, it sounds like, I mean, are they dying along the way? Are they?
No. They're not dying. They're just really, really hungry and really thirsty. And the food that they have to eat is just nasty shit. And the water they have to drink is rotten and it has bugs.
So they have like dysentery hasn't set in to like wipe them out or anything.
It's setting in though. Well, that's the problem is like they themselves and their horses are dealing with like a lot of stomach problems, and that becomes a compounding feature that we'll talk about soon.
I mean, can you imagine, Bryce? And
no, dude, no, I mean, no. Actually, in reading all of this, in just reading what they had to go through in all of this, I'm like. Every single paragraph, by the end of it, I was like, fuck this. Yep, fuck this. I would never do this. They are out of their goddamn mind.
But what gets people to that point, right? Like, what was the plot? Like, what did they think this is worth this suffering because X? What X could you fill in, right?
Well, that's the thing is, okay, but Joe had like created this, we're going to save our brothers, right? Like there's no sacrifice so great as a man that's willing to lay down his life for his brother. So that's what they're going to do to liberate, Independence, Missouri for the Mormons.
All right. That actually does make more sense, especially from a military standpoint. And I'll give this to Joe. That actually is a great card to play as a military leader, right? The concept of you never leave a man behind, right? And we'll all die to bring that one back, but we're going to try, right? And we're going to go through hell and turmoil to get there. So, okay, in my mind, I that makes sense, but still. So you're talking about they're starving, their horses are not doing well, right? So I presume they have to do a majority of like walking and just trying to keep their horses alive, if they even are still alive. And you're starving and there's no water and you're probably constantly having to shit. Like, how could you not, all
the time. And I have to, I got to throw a bone to the movie that I watched, because there's like this 20-minute movie. I said earlier that it's going to be in the show notes. I recommend anybody watch it to really get an idea of what the fuck happened here. But it shows like there at one point, the guy Sylvester Smith runs out of water in his canteen and he's like, there ain't no damn water, whatever. And then they open up one of the barrels and they
oh yeah, this is the whiner, Sylvester the whiner, right?
Sylvester the bitch. That's pretty much it. Yeah. He gets labeled as the camp's bitch.
And in fairness, his horse died on day one, so he's probably pretty grumpy by now.
I can only imagine. So one of the guys like takes a scoop of water out of the barrel and tries, and he's like, it's been poisoned, and they spit it out or whatever. And all of the guys are all distraught and pissed off and everything. And then Joseph just comes up with a shovel and digs. Everybody gathers around. What's he doing? And then he gets down to, like 6 feet or no, like 4 feet down, maybe, he's kind of standing in the hole. And then, and he says, look, and then he walks away and everybody, looks. Oh, he dug a well. Joseph Smith dug a well for us. Like he's been doing all of his life, digging holes.
All right. Remember a minute ago I said he really knew how to inspire his troops? Never mind, because if any commander-in-chief grabbed a shovel and started digging, if every member of his army didn't immediately grab shovels and start digging right where he was, terrible army. That they just stood there and watched. Like, that just doesn't seem right at all. But it's like, he's doing it already.
He was like a get shit doneer type of commander. He was if my boys are going to be doing something, I'm going to be doing it. Actually, there's a story that comes up later. I didn't include it in the notes, but he was like, I became aware that I was fed some fresh bread while my men were fed sour bread. And I approached the cook and was like, this is shit. And he was all angry because he wasn't fed the same sour bread that his troops were. So
Bryce, that is indeed admirable, and I'll give it to him. And there's been plenty of generals in history that have gotten cred from their soldiers for that, right? For kind of being willing to suffer with them. But my point is, when the general grabs a shovel and starts digging, and you're standing there watching, you don't just sit there and watch, right? You say, oh, we're supposed to dig now, right? That's a thing. He doesn't have to say it. He's digging. Of course we have to dig.
You dig too.
Our job isn't to watch our general. So but the way the story's told is just like, yes, it was Joe alone that dug this well. And it's like, that's absurd. Because if that was true, his army sucked.
Dude, you have to watch it. It's a 20-minute video. Go check the show notes because, dude, it's fantastic. I'll send you the link because it does really portray what the amazing prophet Joseph Smith in the proper light that I think they want to portray him.
But was there that was in the movie, but did you ever find any kind of correspondences or letters?
No.
Oh.
No.
No.
No, that was just the movie.
All right, never mind. I gave all that shit for the soldiers not backing him up, but it was just some idiot that knew nothing about the military that made a dumb movie. Okay. Yep,
exactly. Imagine that. All right, so we're finally getting to this next thing that I teased at. Are you ready for it?
Oh, I actually forgot how many. You've given me so many teasers. But
I know,
anyway.
dude. I told you this episode is packed with stuff.
I'm excited because I don't even know which thing I'm supposed to be excited about. That's why I'm excited.
On June 1834, let me get through the whole thing. Let me get through it.
You might hear me gasp or something, so.
During our travels, we visited several of the mounds which had been thrown up by the ancient inhabitants of this country, Nephites, Lamanites, etc. And this morning, I went up on a high mound near the river, accompanied by the brethren. I'm not going to make it through this.
Yeah, I'm not either. Okay.
From this mound, we could overlook the tops of the trees and view the prairie on each side of the river as far as our vision could extend, and the scenery was truly delightful. Or delightsome, some might say. On the top of the mound were stones, which presented the appearance of 3 altars having been erected one above the other, according to the ancient order. And the remains of bones were strewn over the surface of the ground.
What?
Just let me just hang on.
Okay.
The brethren procured a shovel and a hoe, and removing the earth to a depth of about 1 foot, discovered the skeleton of a man, almost entire, and between his ribs the stone point of a Lamanitish arrow, which evidently produced his death. Elder Burr Riggs retained the arrow. The contemplation of the scenery around us produced peculiar sensations in our bosoms, and subsequently the visions of the past being opened to my understanding by the Spirit of the Almighty.
Bryce,
I discovered that the person whose skeleton was before us was a white Lamanite.
Oh my God.
A large, thick-set man and a man of God.
Bryce.
His name was Zelph.
Zelph? Oh, is this?
His name was Zelph. Just hang on. He was a warrior and chieftain under the great prophet Onondagas.
Oh my God.
Who was known from the hill Camorra, or Eastern Sea, to the Rocky Mountains.
Okay. You messed up by reading it all, because I could have gone down 10 rabbit holes on your journey to get to the end. I don't even remember the things I wanted to laugh at the beginning because of how fun it got at the end. Wow. I don't know. I feel like I want you to start over because I just forgot how much insanity was in that. So this is because
they dug up a mound. They were curious about the mound. They found a mound with a bunch of bones around it.
And so they just started digging for sport to say what's under this mound. And they're like, oh, a skeleton. And Joe's like, it must be that insanity.
It must be Zelph.
Zelph. So anyway, I assume now the phrase Zelph on a shelf makes sense. Like, I've seen that all over the place on the internet. I never knew what it meant. I just knew it was some sort of ex-Mormon thing, right?
Yeah, Zelph on the shelf.
So essentially what that means is Mormons don't talk about this very often.
No.
But this is what Joseph Smith said. Makes sense now. Zelph on the shelf.
Okay, and so we just got to spend some time on this. Okay, so it said
we have to spend a whole episode on this, Bryce. This sounds
I know,
insane.
dude. I know. And that's why this is probably going to be like 3 fucking episodes because this is just crazy. So, okay, so they dug up this skeleton and they found an arrow in the guy's
wait.
ribs.
This is the thing. There's so many things to say and you reminded me.
I know. I'm going to the beginning.
No, Bryce,
I'm going to the beginning.
It was you already missed something. It was a Lamanitish arrow.
Yes.
What the hell's a Lamanitish arrow?
Lamanitish, like an elvish arrow? What?
No, it's Lamanitish. What the fuck? What the hell do you know what Lamanitish means? Sorry.
No, the best part about it is it says that it's a stone point of a Lamanitish arrow. If these people were using armor and were using swords and were using whatever metallurgy that was included in the Book of Mormon, why would they still be using stone arrow points when metal, iron, steel arrow points are way easier to make?
Of course.
Well, so that's the first thing.
I still think Lamanitish is funnier.
Lamanitish.
Because it means nothing. At least stone, I know what it means. I know what a stone is.
At the beginning, it was so great because he's like, what does he say? Yeah, thrown up by the ancient inhabitants of this country, Lamanites, Nephites, etc. Like,
yeah, right.
That just encompasses all of them. So, okay, so we got this skeleton, or a corpse of a guy.
I'm sorry, a white Lamanite?
Yeah, we're getting there.
Oh, it gets more explained? Okay, sorry.
So they dig up this white Lamanite, and it says that he's a large, thick-set man. Yeah. That's not something you determine off of a skeleton. You pull that information off of a corpse. A body with some meat still on it, right?
Yeah, that does make sense. I don't know. Maybe he's really big boned. I'm not a fat, I'm big boned.
Well, then how would they know that he was white?
Now that one I can't give you that one. I have no idea. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe he was wearing just white people clothes and they knew.
The white people clothes.
Maybe they just knew. That's white people clothes.
Okay, and then it goes on to say he's a warrior and chieftain under the great prophet Onondagas. Okay, and I have to point out that there's a county that Joseph lived near in New York that was Onondaga or Canandaigua, Onondagas, Canandaigua. Just throwing it out there. He just whatever he could latch onto and grab it, and just he'd pull it out and switch around a couple of letters, and then there'd be a new name.
I grew up outside of Philadelphia in the Lehigh Valley, so
the Lehigh, right?
I mean, these are I never made that reference because it was spelled different, like Lehigh, the GH version, but. Mm-hmm. Anyway, okay, so so this was I hope the craziest example of Joe just coming up with something on the spot. I mean, he's creative. I'll give him that.
Well, it's not done though. It's not done. There's more to the passage.
Oh, okay.
It said he was a white Lamanite, right? The Lamanites are the ones with the dark skins.
Yeah,
right?
but this is a white one. So we have an albino.
He's a
Lamanite?
white one.
Or like,
here you go. This is the rest of the passage. The curse was taken from Zelph.
Oh God! Of course it was.
Or at least in part.
In part, because he was still a Lamanite. we can clean the black off him. We can't clean the Lamanite off him. God, I sound like such a racist. It's just because I'm immune to this story. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, everybody. If you knew the Book of Mormon story, it's not even that offensive to listen to this. It's so tame compared to what the Book of Mormon actually says. All right, sorry. We're back.
And the end of the passage says, the most insightful part of the revelation, he was killed in battle by the arrow found among his ribs. Well, during the last great struggle of the Lamanites and the Nephites. Boom.
Yeah, last one.
There's Zelph the White Lamanite for you.
Yeah. Did they? I mean, I feel like if that was the case, they would have been like, well, shit, we should pick up these bones and take them with us as some sort of relic and perhaps put it in Zion or, you know what I mean? Something. No, they're just like, oh, that's cool. Let's move on.
What's so great about it is like, okay, if this were a corpse, right? If this were a skeleton, like it says from Lamanite times, right? Died in the last great battle in 420 AD, whatever, right? If this were a person that died then, it would be a skeleton, right? There wouldn't be much flesh left on the body.
No.
It would just be bones.
Especially if it was just like, it wasn't even in a box. It was just in dirt. Right.
In dirt, a foot. It even says a foot down.
Yeah.
A foot down. It would be,
nothing.
I mean, it would be.
There's nothing.
Yeah.
Everything. The clothes would be gone. It would all just, unless it was like metal, it's pretty much gone.
Yeah. So, but they gave us details saying that it was a white, thick man, white skinned. So what? Maybe a conquistador, or maybe it was a mountain man. Or I don't know, like what there's so many other possible explanations that are way more recent than, 1400 years old at that point. That would explain why it's a corpse, not just a skeleton.
Wow. I don't know. I might have lost your train of thought there.
I think I lost my own train of thought. But the point is, it's like, okay. It's so absurd that Joe's claiming that it's Lamanite when supposedly the Lamanites, they died in 420. That was the last great struggle between them. And then it was a corpse. It was not a skeleton like you would expect that would be 1400 years old.
Oh, I'm sorry. So in what you're reading, Joseph Smith's testimony of this, they found a corpse.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I get it now.
But you would expect if it were 1400 years old, it would be just bones, just a skeleton of somebody.
Yeah, of course.
So not only is Joe coming up with this crazy fucking revelation out of who knows where, just imagining it into existence, right?
Yeah. What was the name of Zelph's commander again?
Onondagas.
Onondagas. Oh, sorry. I needed a quick laugh. Thank you. All right.
But that's exactly it. He was just like grabbing something out of thin air and was like, this supports the Book of Mormon. He just had such a great propensity to doing this. You got to admire it. It's ballsy, but you got to admire it. It's yes, this corpse, I know the history behind this corpse because God told me in a vision.
Joseph Smith might be like history's best bullshitter. Like no one's ever been like documented as well at bullshitting, right? Just
I don't know, man. Bernie Madoff? I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Joe does have competition.
Very, very well documented.
Joe does have competition for world's greatest bullshitter, but I'm saying he's in the running. He's pretty good at it.
All right, that got us through one whole paragraph, like the last hour of conversation. There's still 3 more pages.
Yeah. But you know what? But that did give us wait, did you say 3 more pages? Oh my God. Bryce, I might have to call it. It's getting pretty late here.
Let's get to a good stopping point.
That's what you keep saying.
I know, dude, because it's so amazing.
But yeah, that was that really was a good, I guess, way of explaining to me. Yeah, the reason shit gets so crazy in Joe's world is because he does this, but then it becomes like part of the doctrine, right?
Yeah,
whatever shit,
yeah.
like he solves the problem of the moment, and then has to cope with the fact that has ramifications forever, right? Like that's kind of how it sounds.
He's digging his own grave in so many cases, just like with this Zelph. He was just imagining it. He was just coming up with it on the spot. You know he was. You know, after they were walking away, Joseph, everybody was like, Joseph, prophet, tell us what happened to that man? You know, a great white man. You know, what happened to him? Oh, he was a great Lamanite. Zelph was his name, and blah, 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 blah.
But perhaps though, that you got the inflection wrong of the question. Maybe they were all looking at him saying, so Joe, can you tell us what this mound is? You know what this is? Come on, Mr. Prophesy anything. What is this thing? And then suddenly he better have a damn good answer to that question. I mean, that's, again, Bryce, like, let's just make sure we explore all possibilities.
I love it. So well said. Wait, what the fuck was going through his mind? I have to ask that all the time when I'm doing research for this. Like, what the fuck was going through Joseph's mind, dude?
Yeah. But that at least explains a motive, right? So in one hand, the motive could have either been just like, I just want to sound like a genius because I'm a narcissist. And the other one is just like, I better say something because I have a problem and I need to solve it. And he seemed like a problem solver.
For better or worse, really. I mean, he kind of shot himself in the foot, like in the case of this. But I mean, yeah.
Well, again, he was a great problem solver for the immediate problem, and I don't think he had the ability to understand the ramifications of the solution in the long term.
Like with trying to, getting up on a pedestal after this snake bit Martin Harrison saying, "Oh, that's what happens when you tempt the Lord" and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows what ramifications that could have later on down the road, but it fixed the problem at the moment and it sounded fucking smart at the time.
Oh.
Okay, so we're going to get through one more paragraph and then we're going to call it good for this episode and reconvene.
And listen, to all of your listeners, I apologize. I know I have slowed this story down so much by being on the show. I get it. I'm the reason. It's all my fault. But I don't know. I hope you are like me, that you've kind of really become intrigued with these characters. And I just want to just like squeeze Bryce like an orange. It's like, no, give me more info out of it. I want to know more about him. Tell me more about him. So yeah, I don't know. It's all my fault. And, but okay. So how many, one more paragraph? So everybody,
one more paragraph.
I'll try my best to just like, let us get through this. But man, I like to squeeze Bryce's orange. All right, here we go. I want the juice. I want the juice.
I'll give you the juice. Quote, this is from Joseph giving another prophecy. I said, the Lord had revealed to me that a scourge would come upon the camp in consequence of the fractious and unruly spirits that appeared among them, that they should die like sheep with the rot.
What?
Still, if they would repent and humble themselves before the Lord, the scourge in great measure might be turned away. But as the Lord lives, the members of this camp will suffer for giving way to their unruly temper. End quote.
What did they do? He is pissed.
He is fucking pissed.
What is he so mad about? Goodness me. That was, I don't know. It's like he just wants them all to die all of a sudden.
That's what's going to leave us off as a teaser for next week's episode.
Oh, man.
That's what it's talking about here. We got fractious and unruly spirits that were happening, and we can be sure that our good friend Sylvester Smith is going to come back into play here pretty soon. You know, Joseph is threatening that if they break off, if there's more fractious unruly spirits, that they'll die like sheep with the rot. So, afraid that has to be our cliffhanger for this week's episode. David Michael, thank you very much for coming on to the show. Give us a quick 30-second elevator speech. Tell us about your show.
Well, thank you, Bryce, for having me. This has been so much fun, and I'm so excited that it's not over. Can't wait till we get back at it. Sorry, I have to. Okay, so we're shifting to me now. So yes, I'm the host of the podcast My Book of Mormon, and basically I'm someone that was knew nothing. I'm called a nevermo. Knew nothing about Mormonism, and just decided, wouldn't it be fun to just read the Book of Mormon and record myself doing it? So yeah, did that. Read the Pearl of Great Price, and then we got to the Doctrines and Covenants, and by then Bryce and I had become friends, and I asked him to co-host it with me, and he's doing it with me, and it has been so much fun because it's like I don't know. It's like we get to see not only the historical characters that we get on this show, but then kind of here's what they actually doctrinally told people that people still believe. And we get to kind of fuse those two together. And I think it's been awesome. So if you're interested, you can check it out. My Book of Mormon podcast, and anything you want to know about the show is at mybookofmormonpodcast.com. That's about all I have to say about that, Bryce. I think that's about it.
Very cool. And I should say this. I'm fairly certain that like 98% of my 6 listeners listen to your show as well. But if you're of that 2%, you know, that quarter of a person or whatever that hasn't listened to the show yet, please do it. It's a lot of fun. The whole backlog is awesome. I've listened to it all quite frequently. It's a lot of fun to listen back to the Book of Mormon and the Pricey Pearl. Jesus, it's so amazing. I mean, fucking Kolob, dude. Fucking Kolob.
Kolob.
Anyway, so yeah, check out the show, and you know, we're co-hosting for Doctrine and Covenants, and I gotta say, I had to leave out a lot of revelations that were given at this time just for sheer sake of non-spoilability. I don't want to spoil anything for you, so we're not getting any Doctrine and Covenants out of this out of these episodes because I just couldn't bring you on the show and just, you know, violate the no spoilers law that you've set out.
You are a gentleman and a scholar, sir. Thank you. But I will say, I don't know how long you can keep that up, because at our pace with the Doctrines and Covenants, we might be doing it for quite some time. But you know what? I don't know. I should stop apologizing for it, because, come on, we're having so much fun.
Right, exactly. And, you know, I'm just going to try and stay ahead of it, and that's all that matters. Pretty sure I can do that. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Wow. Anyway, yeah, so David, until next time, I bring you on back again next week's episode, and we finish talking about Zion's camp here.
Bryce, and don't torture me and have like 2 or 3 special interview episodes in between. Like, we got to get back to the story, Bryce. We got to get back to it. You left us on too much of a cliffhanger. Come on.
We'll see. I'll have to leave everybody hanging.
All right. Then.
Awesome. Well, yeah. I mean, thanks for coming on, and I'll talk to you next week about this.
You bet.
And that is it for part 1 of the Zion's Camp episode. Thank you once again, David Michael, for coming on and joining me for this discussion. And we're only halfway through. We got a lot more to talk about. And I know during the interview I said that that's going to be next week's episode. That'll actually be the next historical episode. That'll be coming out 2 weeks from when this episode comes out. I just do that to keep to the regular schedule of having a historical episode come out every 2 weeks and then doing the special episodes on the alternating 2 weeks. So with that, had some new patrons to thank. Had a couple of new Nemo adolescent rebels to thank. We had Misty, Corky, Anna, and David. Thank you, all 4 of you. Thank you very much for contributing to the show, for signing up at Patreon and supporting and making sure that ensuring that the show continues on and comes out on schedule. Also had some new Nemo apostates to thank. Looks like we have Corrine, Jared, and Doonin. Doonin, I guess it is. Maybe Dweenin. I'm not sure how to say that name. But yeah, Dweenin, Corrine, and Jared. Thank you all very, very much for your support for the show. I mean, being an adolescent rebel is fantastic, but to the three of you, thank you for upgrading to that next level and, really taking the support of the show up to another notch. It also looks like we have a new Nemo demon, Colette. Colette, thank you very, very much for your support of the show. Obviously, Colette just wasn't satisfied with pledging an earthly amount. She had to descend into the realms of the Nemo Outer Darkness Kingdom, and she's become a Nemo demon for the cause of supporting the show and making sure that we continue to corrupt the internet with as much Naked Mormon history as possible. So Colette, thank you very, very much for your support. Got in a couple of new donations to the GoFundMe page. Those just keep trickling in, and, I just can't express my appreciation enough. So we had Anonymous, another Anonymous, and let's see, Hal, my good buddy Hal. Of course, I used Hal's voice from the last episode for the intro to this episode, so thank you very much, Hal. I hope that somewhat expresses my appreciation for the donation. And then also got in a donation from Jared, and he left a message with it that is it's really good to hear. He says, Bryce, thank you so much for the work you're doing. My wife is a true believing Mormon, and that has been hard. Listening to your show has given me the community feeling and actually helped me not be so mad at the situation. I love your topics and the work you do. And he goes on to, just say that he just really enjoys the show and whatnot. So, Jared, thank you very, very much for, not only for your donation and for signing up on Patreon, but for that very heartfelt and very kind message. And for posting that message with your donation. That was it just hit me right in the feelers, Jared. Thank you so much. I really have a lot of gratitude for your support. All right, got in an email from Colin, I believe. And he says, hi, as ever, thanks for the great podcast. I'm completely addicted. My only contact with Mormonism was a trip to Salt Lake City for a completely unrelated academic conference a few years back. I naturally took the church up on its offer of a few free films about Joseph Smith and then was amused and fascinated to read the true story behind him when I got home. Anyway, I have two questions. So just going to pause real quick before I read those questions. It's kind of weird how they offer you those free films and then you see the difference behind who Joseph Smith really was. This episode was actually kind of based around one of those. I mean, that's how I got introduced to the meat of this episode's, topic. So, it's interesting to see the difference between the actual real portrayal of what happened versus what the church portrays in their films, their free films about Joseph Smith, which are all available for free on YouTube as well. There's quite a few of them out by this point. So the two questions he goes on to say, firstly, you often talk about your testimony, but seem to be using that word in a way that I'm not familiar with. To me, it's like the story you tell when you're questioned about your religious beliefs, but you seem to be using it to mean a lot more, like it's something you could lose. What does the word mean to a Mormon? This may be a really obvious point, and maybe I missed when you answered it. Well, to answer your question, it's just testimony is specific in Mormonese. It's very, very specific to a testimony for Mormons is like a sort of tangible thing that's used as sort of a righteousness barometer, I guess I should say. It's kind of you have a testimony of the church. You don't have a testimony like you're giving what you believe. You're telling somebody what you believe. The testimony is like how much you believe in what you say you believe. So from an early age, Mormons are conditioned to have a testimony and to bear the testimony publicly up in front of the congregation. And it's this growing, ebbing and flowing type of tangible thing, sort of, to Mormons. I have no other way to describe it than a tangible thing. That's not very descriptive, but it's they would say that it's like your spirit, right? It's almost like your spirit. Your testimony is like your belief in the church and how. No, that's not even a good analogy. Yeah, I don't know how to describe it exactly. It's just a gauge to see how far engaged into the church you are, basically. So if somebody says, like, I have a strong testimony, that means that they don't have many questions. They're not experiencing a lot of cognitive dissonance about the church. But if somebody says that, like, you know, I don't have a strong testimony, or my testimony is backsliding, or is dying, I guess that doesn't seem like a Mormon phrase. But, you know, they say oftentimes that your testimony is either growing or shrinking at any given time. And it's like if you do something to help strengthen your testimony, that means you're doing something like church related. You're doing something that helps, you know, put your mind on God or put your mind on the church. So it's like strengthening your testimony and making you a stronger member in the church. So it's like the gauge that they use for each other, that Mormons use for each other to determine how involved with the church they are and how much they believe in the church, I guess. That's sort of how I can answer that. I hope that answer suffices for your question. The second question was, I really enjoyed your recent interview with Tanner, but was struck by something he said about how Mormonism training had so thoroughly disproved other religions to him that when he left Mormonism, he pretty much went straight to atheism. Yet I presume he's talking about the training that he got as a missionary, which is only open to males, right? So is there a difference between what happens to the faith of men and women after they leave Mormonism? So just one quick correction there. No, missions are not only open to males. Men and women can go on missions. It's just more common for men to go. And oftentimes with female missions, they often will station them in like visitor centers and stuff, or like in the tour spots. They're kind of like the faces, the public faces, like, of the church. So like when you go to a car show and they're like debuting a new car, they have a couple of women like around on the stage dressed up all nice and everything. Yeah, that's kind of how it is with like Temple Square and with the other touristy spots like in Carthage, Illinois and stuff that are owned by the church. They staff them with female missionaries oftentimes. So missions are open to males and females, but that training that he was talking about, it's not just the training that you receive on the mission, because that's a very intensified version. It's the entire indoctrination cycle that he was talking about with how Mormonism is just by nature. They teach you that all other religions are not the complete truth, or not the complete and full gospel. And Mormonism is like the post-grad version of Christianity, whereas everything else is, just a graduate student of Christianity. So, that they see themselves like, if you are a Mormon, then you have all the secrets and all of the knowledge about Christianity that's necessary to get up to, your own level of exaltation or whatever it is. But the other churches are just inferior in the fact that they don't have that. So that's why it's preached. Why Mormonism is often preaches against other religions, or they don't even care to know about other religions. Oftentimes, a lot of Mormons get like lockstep into the mindset of the true believing Mormon, and their testimony is strong, and they feel no need to branch out and go anywhere beyond what they know, to even study other religions. So that's kind of the training and indoctrination that he's talking about, that Tanner was talking about during the interview. And it serves to do like almost a bipolarization of of people's perspectives of a religion, because it's like you see either there's one true religion and all the others are false, like Mormonism is the one true religion. Every other single religion out there that has ever been invented is all false, or doesn't have the full truth, or whatever they would say. Once you leave and you determine that Mormonism isn't true, you've already gone to the work of disproving a lot of the other religions, which is a little more intensified on the mission. I will give them that. But it's just with the entire indoctrination cycle of being a Mormon. So the training in and of itself really is just what Mormonism is. You've gone to the work of proving all the other religions. And then once you find out that Mormonism is false, it's like, it's a really easy jump to go from saying all of the religions are false except for this one, to the perspective of all of the religions are false. So that's, I think, what Tanner was kind of saying, and that's kind of the same exact conclusion that I came to. So yeah, that was everything. Colin, thank you for sending in the email. I hope that I answered your questions. That was about the best I can do. Got an email from Cliff here, and it was a pretty long email. I'm not going to go into the minutia here, but the long and short of the email is, he talks about forgiveness and people going through religious upbringings and being able to forgive the church, or he kind of touches on what the point is and what the definition of forgiveness is. I do agree a lot with you, Cliff, in saying that the church is it's tainted the word forgiveness quite a lot, where you consider forgiveness something just like a process, like a big process that you have to deal with the church through like atonement. But just that idea of forgiving somebody is a little hard to understand from Mormon upbringing perspective, because that word forgiveness has changed. I've talked a little bit about how oftentimes religions will change like the definition of a word like truth or correctness or whatever, and they'll replace it with their own meaning. Well, forgiveness is kind of the same way, and that's the argument that Cliff makes here. So I thoroughly agree with you there. And he goes on to talk about like true forgiveness and what forgiveness should really be. And I have to agree with him on most parts. But I could also say that there is also a place for let's see, he says here, he carried a lot of anger and resentment towards the church, his parents, and Christianity in general, but he blamed most of his problems in his life on his upbringing. But eventually that didn't work any longer, especially as I got involved in personal development work. I recognized the damage I was doing to myself and those around me by hanging on to resentments, anger, and blame. And I do agree with that. Hanging on to resentment is not a good thing to do. It's toxic to the person that's holding on to the resentment and to the relationship between that person and whoever they're resenting or whatever they might be resenting. But I would just kind of go out and say that there's also a place for that anger and for that scrutiny to flourish, to be present, because yes, I definitely agree that forgiveness is very important, but I also think that there's a time and a place for somebody with an objective like I take on this show with airing out my resentments and the anger towards the church that I might have, or trying to describe why I am angry about something when it comes to church doctrine or church teachings. So I feel like that there's definitely a place for both here. It's not an either or perspective. And, if you can create that kind of, that place where people can feel free to get out that resentment and that anger, and they can feel free to express that, it seems like that there's a very therapeutic element or aspect to being able to do that as well. And by the end of Cliff's email, he kind of says that this is his closing line. He says, "Thanks again for all you're doing for the ex-Mormon and ex-religious communities to help people think more critically and to break free of the mental and emotional bonds of their upbringing. Cheers, Cliff." And that's exactly what the objective of this show is about. But beyond that, Cliff, I don't want to sound like I'm straw manning his argument here or like I'm trying to put words in his mouth or anything. So he did pose the possibility of coming on and talking about forgiveness in the church. And I think I think I'm going to take him up on that. So I'll be in touch with you here pretty soon, Cliff. And I look forward to, talking to you about that and maybe wrapping that up into a topic that's, pertinent and interesting for the listeners as well. And, maybe you can lend your voice to the ever-growing body of the Nemo Information Kingdom, I should say. So, Cliff, thank you for sending in the email and for your words and thoughts on forgiveness and just your kind words in general. All right, and that is it for the feedback segment. So there's one last thing that I wanted to talk about really quickly here. There was an iTunes review that came in a little while ago that I just wanted to talk about real quick. It was by Fran Stuff. He said, Bryce works amazingly hard to research each podcast he publishes. If you want to know the true history of the LDS Church, you'll find it here. I look forward to each episode and actually get excited when I see one. I can't think of any other podcast that I get excited about. Give it a listen. Hey, Bryce, sorry it took me so long to review. I finally got a computer and an iTunes account. So, to Fran Stuff, I just wanted to take a second and say thank you very, very much for writing that iTunes review. And I don't talk about iTunes reviews ever. A lot of podcasts will read every single review that they get in, but that becomes a drag after a while. So I try not to ever read the iTunes reviews, but they really are a necessary aspect for the podcast for people to find the podcast, right? So any podcast that gets, high, the 5-star, 4-star reviews, that really helps out the scoring quite a lot, especially 5-star reviews. But then, any 1-star and 2-star reviews, those really damage the credibility quite a lot. If you see a single podcast that's, about any topic and it has, 10 reviews, 6 of which are only a 1-star review, you're probably not going to pay attention to that podcast. But if you look at a show like this one that has, 75 5-star reviews and then, only 4 4-star reviews, and then the numbers just get smaller after that, people are much more prone to listen to a podcast that has higher reviews like that. So to Fran Stuff, whose comment that I just read, and to everybody that goes on and rates the show, I just want to extend out a personal thank you. There's really nothing else that helps out the podcast more than these positive reviews. And I don't really have any way of expressing how thankful I am for this. Like, you guys are such an amazing audience. Seriously, like, I'm pretty sure that out of all of the podcasts out there, this one podcast has the best audience of all of the other podcasts, because you guys are so fantastic. And when you write into the show and, get in contact with me, when you go onto the Facebook page, I really, really enjoy it. And I love interacting with you guys a lot. So, having these reviews on here is just a huge help. And I want to thank you all so, so very much for being the best audience ever. Seriously, to everybody that has reviewed, thank you very, very much. And to everybody that listens to the show, thank you. Thank you for hanging in and for sticking with the show as long as you have. And if anybody is, interested in or feels it necessary to put on like a 1-star or a 2-star review, I mean, those hurt, yes, but the few lower reviews that I have received I've taken under constructive criticism, and I've made adjustments, and, I don't want to say that they're appreciated because they hurt the show stats a lot, but I don't like to hear it, but I like to know the information. How's that? I like to know when I'm doing something wrong so I can make adjustments so, so the show becomes more listener friendly. So if anybody is feeling like they aren't liking the show and you want to go on and leave a 1-star or a 2-star review, please, if you feel it necessary, do so, but please at least leave a comment with that review so I can tell where something went wrong, so I can make an adjustment, or even better, just send me a personal email before sending the review. Talk to me and see if there's something that, a concern that I can address, and I'd be more than happy to do that. So, all of that to say, thank you for writing reviews in, and if anybody does want to go on to iTunes or Stitcher or wherever they review, or whatever podcast app you use, and wants to review the show, I deeply, deeply appreciate it. And, I try not to talk about these iTunes reviews because it just sounds like I'm selling myself, and I'm really bad at selling myself. So, you have to do it sometimes, and I haven't talked about it in, probably a year now. So, I just had to take a few minutes to do that. But that's it for the meat, the listener feedback and everything for this podcast. Before finishing up today, I need to thank a few people. Start off by thanking my good buddy Hal for his lending his voice to the intro of the show. Thank you to all the patrons who contribute to the show. If you'd like to count yourself among their ranks, you can go to patreon.com/nakedmormonism to sign up to make a per episode donation. If you can't afford the couple of bucks per month, you can always help out the show a bunch by going on to iTunes or Stitcher or your podcast app of choice and leave a review for the show. Like I talked about earlier, it only costs a couple of minutes instead of a couple of bucks. Thank you to everybody that shares the show through Facebook, Twitter, and other social media. If you want to get in touch with me directly, you can email at nakedmormonism@gmail.com, and I'll try to answer your questions during the next listener mail segment. Check out the show notes and a lot more information about the show on nakedmormonismpodcast.com. Thank you very, very much to Demonista for posting things on the Facebook page. And, oftentimes I just glance over that, but I really do want to say thank you, Demonista, for sticking in there for so long and just always being a very reliable person. I really can't thank you enough. So if you want a bunch of Mormon memes and a lot of cool Mormon history and stuff, you can go to the Facebook page for Naked Mormonism. There's a lot of fun stuff there. Thank you very much to Jason Camo for his music that was used on the show with his permission. If you'd like to hear more of his beautiful music, you can go to aloststateofmind.com. For me, Bryce Blankenagel, I would like to especially thank you, the listener, for lending me your ear. I hope to talk at you next time here on the Naked Mormonism Podcast. There's the cure for horse foundering. Yep. Yeah, you want to hear the cure for horse foundering?
Do I?
Brother Ezra Thayer administered medicine mixed in a quart stone bottle and prepared it as follows: a 3-penny paper of tobacco, half an ounce of coppers, and 2 tablespoonfuls of cayenne pepper, and the bottle filled with water when he could not procure whiskey. That cured the horses of their hoof ailment. It just made them drunk, one guy. So they didn't feel the pain.
That one guy's horse didn't make it.
Right?
Maybe he ran out of whiskey.
This was what happened when they would ever find a rattlesnake. A guy fell asleep, and on the prairie next to him there was a rattlesnake. And when he awoke, he coiled up with 1 foot of his head, a rattlesnake lying between him and his hat, which he had in his hand when he fell asleep. The brethren gathered around him, saying, "It is a rattlesnake. Let us kill it." Brother Humphrey said, "No, I'll protect him. You shan't hurt him, for he and I had a good nap together."
Well, there's a good reason. Yeah.
Well, I mean, he apparently didn't get hurt by snakes like Martin Harris did in this case.
Well, we don't know that he's hurt yet, Bryce. All I know is he got bit. Martin was just like, "Hey, I'll take it one step further. Not only don't you kill him, we need to let them feed on us."
I'm sorry that you had to shut your mouth for 15 fucking minutes, you poor thing. Now I got that to edit out. I hope I don't miss that.